Good morning. I'm Ward 1 Councilmember Nadeau, the Chair of the Committee on Public Works and Operations. Today is Monday, April 3rd, 2023, and I'm calling to order this meeting of the committee to conduct a budget oversight hearing for the Office of Human Rights and the Office of the Chief Technology Officer over the Zoom platform. The time is 9:07 a.m. The first agency on today's agenda is the Office of Human Rights. The Office of Human Rights exists to secure an end to unlawful discrimination in employment, housing, public accommodations, and educational institutions for any reason other than that of individual merit. It enforces several important laws, the oldest and most central of which is the Human Rights Act of 1977. The office's current director is Nin Kane. The largest segment of the agency is the Enforcement Division, which handles intake, mediation, and investigation of complaints alleging unlawful discrimination. This division handles complaints of discrimination in housing, employment, public accommodations, and education based on over 20 protected characteristics under the DC Human Rights Act, complaints under certain DC civil rights laws, and complaints under federal laws. The Enforcement Division leadership also oversees a specialized legislative and compliance section that helps with matters such as developing government equal employment opportunity training materials. Several small but important divisions support the functions of the office. These include the Operations Division, which provides human resources and other administrative services, the Legal Division, or Office of the General Counsel, and the Communications and Community Engagement Division, which, among other responsibilities, conducts awareness campaigns regarding human rights protections. In a year of budget constraints, the Office of Human Rights experienced an 11.2% reduction, bringing the operating budget of the agency to $8.5 million. Today, we will discuss the major reductions to OHR and its investigations programs, FTEs, Fair Housing Program, and language access oversight. These programs are critical to holding violators of the Human Rights Act accountable and making sure district residents are protected under the law. I look forward to investigating how these cuts will impact the agency's operations. The second agency on today's agenda is the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. The Office of the Chief Technology Officer is a central technology organization of the District of Columbia government. OCTO develops, implements, and maintains the district's technology infrastructure and major enterprise applications, establishes and oversees technology policies and standards for the district, provides technology services and support for district agencies, and develops technology solutions to improve services to businesses, residents, and visitors in all areas of the district government. OCTO's mission is to direct the strategy, deployment, and management of DC government's technology with an unwavering commitment to IT excellence, efficiency, and value for government, residents, businesses, and visitors. The mayor's proposed FY24 operating budget for OCTO is $89,773,683, which represents a 3.8% decrease in operating funds compared with the approved FY23 budget. This proposed budget includes 191 FTEs, which represents a 16.6% decrease in personnel. I'm most immediately concerned with the significant proposed cuts to staff at OCTO, even if they're cuts to vacant positions. I'm sure the agency can argue that those reductions will not have any impact on services, but even if that's true, cutting that many FTEs stunts the growth in OCTO's critical work that I and so many across the district want to be seeing. From cybersecurity to digital equity, there's too much the agency needs to do and scale back its resources now. So I want to make sure we use today to dig into any operational impacts these cuts will have on the agency. I look forward to hearing from our public and government witnesses today on OHR and OCTO. We appreciate you taking the time to help the committee develop recommendations on the mayor's proposed budget. I'd now like to provide some logistical announcements for today's hearing. This hearing is being live streamed at brianneknadeau.com/committee. In order to ensure we hear from all members of the public, I ask that all witnesses stick to their allotted time. Witnesses testifying on behalf of an organization will have 5 minutes to provide oral testimony, and all other witnesses will have 3 minutes. I'd also like to provide some detailed reminders about the Zoom platform and the committee's protocols for the witnesses participating today. All witnesses participating in this webinar are currently listed as attendees in Zoom. This means your microphones are muted and your video cameras are turned off. When it's your turn to join a panel for testimony, I will call your name and a member of my staff will change your status to panelist. If you wish to activate your video while you testify, you need to click the button in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen that looks like a video camera. There'll be a frame that includes a clock keeping your time. When your time is up, I kindly ask you conclude your remarks so that we can ensure that everyone has a chance to be heard. In our first panel, we have one person joining by phone and two people testifying with assistance of a Spanish language translator. So we will work to accommodate everybody so that they can have their voices heard. For any technical difficulties, you can send a message to Ariel Ardura or Sabrine Katie, labeled as committee staff, and they will follow up with you. Additionally, if you're having trouble gaining access to Zoom and you have pre-registered, you can reach my team at 202-741-2111 or by emailing publicworks@dccouncil.gov, and they will try to resolve your issue. So let's now turn to our first panel of witnesses for the Office of Human Rights. Michael Syndrome, Alana Eichner, co-director of the DC chapter of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, Carmen Mejia, member of the DC chapter of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, Linda Mamani, member of the DC chapter of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, and Daniel Duncan, Aid Hafid. Okay. Since not all of our witnesses are here yet, we're going to add two people to this first panel from the next panel, Sierra Cockrell and Natalie Mack. That way, if the others show up, the next panel won't be so big. Okay, so we'll begin this panel with Alana Eichner.
Okay, good morning. Nice to see you, council member. I'm here with Carmen. I'm excited for her testimony in a little bit. So you know us, we're the DC chapter of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. We work for the respect and recognition of the 9,000 domestic workers in the district. And we're really excited because last year we were here at this hearing talking about the hopeful eventual passage of the Domestic Worker Rights Employment Act. And now that bill passed and we're here to really urge you to do what it takes to make sure the rights are this law are realized in the lives of domestic workers. I know I don't need to tell you a lot about who domestic workers are, but we are talking about incredibly vulnerable jobs and jobs that have been devalued and excluded due to racism and sexism, including here in DC. And the part of this new law that the Office of Human Rights has the responsibility to enforce now is really in many ways the centerpiece of this law and the whole reason that this campaign started, because we realized this gaping exclusion in the Human Rights Act for domestic workers, the only group of workers that were excluded. So OHR now has the responsibility to make available written guidance to address common forms of discrimination that individuals in a private home face, and guidance to employers about how to comply with the Human Rights Act. And they need to be able to take cases that domestic workers can now bring to the Office of Human Rights. And so it's really, really essential that OHR has the capacity to do this, to do their part of making the rights real in the lives of domestic workers. Mayor Bowser's budget proposal for the Office of Human Rights, I think, takes us in exactly the wrong direction. We're really concerned that the mayor proposed cutting over 6 full-time positions in the Office of Human Rights, after advocates have said for years that there's ongoing challenges already with OHR enforcing human rights laws and quickly and effectively taking cases. So these challenges will be exacerbated by budget cuts, and it will make it impossible for domestic workers to receive their hard-fought new rights. I think that this law was one of the most exciting things that the council passed last year. And I know that you've been with us, council member, every step of the way. So we're just counting on you to make sure that the office can actually implement this law. I'm urging you to put $354,000 new money in fiscal year 24 for the implementation of this bill. That money comes from that estimate comes from the fiscal impact statement, which determined that this law at OHR needs about 2.5 full-time employees, an investigator, an intake specialist, an investigator, intake specialist, an attorney, and a part-time outreach specialist. And the outreach specialist would be the person who would make sure the community knows about the law, would do guidance and other public outreach. This is a new area of work for OHR. OHR has never had this jurisdiction over domestic workers because they were previously excluded. And so there really needs to be dedicated staff capacity specific to domestic workers so that the office can put out guidance, so they can do community outreach in multiple languages, and they can take cases of domestic workers who experience employment discrimination at a very high rate. I just want to urge that across the board, we hope that you will kind of push back on the mayor's proposal to cut a lot of these positions and instead invest in OHR so they can implement this law, as well as the passed last year Eviction Record Sealing Authority and Fairness in Renting Amendment Act, which was also really excitingly passed last year by the council. So just to close, again, I know you're with us on this issue and you have been for a long time. But for years, domestic workers have talked about the racist roots of this exclusion from DC's Human Rights Act. And this historic change is only going to be possible with new funding so that OHR can take action in effective and timely ways when violations of this new law inevitably do occur for domestic workers. So thanks for your support. And we're really counting on you to kind of recognize domestic workers when Mayor Bowser did not do that in her budget by putting funding in. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
And I'm so sorry, but Linda Mamani has to go to work really soon, and Carmen can stay. Is there any chance we could flip the order of their testimonies to accommodate Linda's work schedule?
That's no problem. Linda may go next.
Linda, ¿estás ahí? ¿Estás lista? Linda, necesitas abrir tu micrófono y tu cámara, si puedes. Ya está. Joel está para hacer la interpretación consecutiva, si puedes tomar la pausa después de cada una o dos frases.
Claro que sí. Buenos días, mi nombre es Linda Mamani. Soy miembro del capítulo de la Alianza Nacional de Trabajadoras del Hogar.
Hello, good morning. My name is Linda Mamani, and I am a member of the DC chapter of the National Domestic Workers Alliance.
Fue una de las trabajadoras del hogar que luchó durante los últimos 4 años para que se aprobara la Carta de Derechos para nosotras.
I was one of the domestic workers who fought for the last 4 years to pass the Bill of Rights.
Llegué a este país hace más de 20 años como trabajadora del hogar y es un trabajo muy lindo y es necesario para las familias que necesitan de nuestros servicios. Esto nos convierte en las trabajadoras esenciales en la sociedad.
I came to this country over 20 years ago as a domestic worker. It is a very nice and necessary job for the families that need our services. This makes us essential workers in society.
Amo cuidar niños. Es gratificante. Ellos tienen una manera especial y única de agradecer, y eso me hace sentir que soy una persona importante en sus vidas. Fuera de cuidarles, los educamos como niñeras, nos encargamos de los tesoros de muchas familias y disfruto de este trabajo.
I love taking care of children. It is very gratifying work. They have a special and unique way of being grateful, and that makes me feel like I am an important person in their lives. Besides taking care of them, we educate them as nannies, and we are taking care of the treasures of many of these families. I enjoy this job very much.
Lamentablemente, sufrimos discriminaciones en nuestro espacio laboral muchas veces. Lo que a mí me pasó es el reflejo de lo que le pasa a diario a muchas trabajadoras del hogar en Washington, D.C.
Unfortunately, we suffer discrimination in our workplaces many times. What happened to me is a reflection of what happens daily to domestic workers in Washington, D.C.
Yo personalmente he sufrido algunas discriminaciones por como luzco. Me dijeron que mi aspecto físico no era tan adecuado y usaron palabras despectivas. Y yo en este momento no prefiero mencionar, son muy inapropiadas. Y también por cómo hablo. Y hablo muy lento, me decían. Me hacían sentir que no valía como persona. Desafortunadamente, no supe a dónde acudir para poner una queja formal.
I personally have suffered discrimination because of the way I look. They told me that my physical appearance was not adequate. They used derogatory words that I prefer not to mention here as they are very inappropriate. They also, I also experienced some discrimination because of the way I speak. I speak very slowly, and they made me feel that I had no worth as a person. Unfortunately, I did not know where to go to file a formal complaint.
Por muchos años no supe que teníamos derechos como trabajadoras del hogar. Ahora aprendí, las cuales tengo como luchar por ellos.
For many years, I did not know that we had rights as domestic workers. Now I have learned what rights I have and how to fight for them.
Estoy aquí hoy hablando porque después de ganar nuestra Carta de Derechos de Trabajadoras del Hogar, tenemos un papel muy importante en la implementación de esta ley histórica que ya hemos ganado.
I am here today speaking out because after winning our Domestic Workers Bill of Rights, we have an important task in the implementation of this historic law that we have already won.
Por eso le pido a este comité que nos ayuden a lograr el presupuesto que necesitamos para que esto sea una realidad.
That is why I'm asking this committee to help us achieve the budget we need to make this a reality.
Esta ley es tan significativa porque antes de la ley decía que yo, como trabajadora del hogar, no era humana y no merecía los mismos derechos que todos los demás. Ahora, los trabajadores del hogar tenemos derecho y la protección contra la discriminación, pero los trabajadores necesitan conocer su nuevo derecho.
This law is significant because before, the law used to say that I, as a domestic worker, was not human and did not deserve the same rights as everyone else. Now, domestic workers have the right to protection against discrimination, but workers need to know their new rights and have them defended.
Y para eso necesita presupuesto. Desafortunadamente, la alcaldesa no ha puesto nada para poder implementar la ley. Por eso les pido que ustedes pongan dinero en el presupuesto del Consejo para poder hacer nuestro sueño realidad.
And for this, you need a budget. Unfortunately, the mayor has not put anything to implement the law. That is why I ask you to put money into the council budget so that we can make our dreams a reality.
Necesitamos que la oficina publique nuevos documentos y capacitaciones sobre esta información y queremos que puedan recibir casos de discriminación y responder rápidamente.
We need the office to put out new documents and trainings on this information, and we want them to be able to receive discrimination cases and respond quickly.
Necesitamos ser educados en el procedimiento de cómo presentar una queja ante el gobierno. Y si experimento una violación de mis derechos en el trabajo, deberíamos inclusive tener una línea telefónica especial para esto y que guarde toda nuestra privacidad de vida.
We need to be educated on the procedure of how to file a complaint with the government if we experience a violation of human rights at work. We should even have a special hotline for this that has all the privacy that is needed for a hotline like this.
Se necesita también educar a nuestras compañeras acerca de que no deben tener miedo con sus estatus migratorios, que en cualquier caso jamás perdemos nuestros derechos como trabajadoras del hogar.
We also need to educate our fellow domestic workers that they should not be afraid because of their immigration status. That in any case, we never lose our rights as domestic workers.
y que este departamento se comprometa a no compartir esta información con nadie en caso que tuviera que recuperar nuestra información.
And we are also looking for the commitment of this department to not share this information with anyone should they need to collect our information.
Todos estos objetivos no se lograrán sin dinero nuevo y en el presupuesto.
All of these goals will not be achieved without new money in the budget.
Luchamos durante años para ganar esta ley, pero tan importante como fue aprobar es ahora implementarla y hacerla realidad.
Gracias. Gracias.
Y si bien todavía estamos tan emocionadas por haber conseguido la aprobación, también estamos vigilantes y enfocadas en apoyarnos en hacerla realidad al 100%, en todo lo que dice nuestra Carta de Derechos.
We fought for many years to win this bill, but as important as it was to pass it, we now have to implement it and make it a reality.
Linda.
While we are still so excited to have one passage, we are also vigilant and focused on supporting you in making it 100% a reality in everything that the Bill of Rights says.
Linda, we need to stop now.
I have a little bit more.
It's
so-
okay. I have it in writing, so we need to.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Okay. Did we lose Carmen?
No, Carmen's right here with me.
Oh, okay, great.
Sí.
1,000. Sí, verdad.
Ya. Ujú. Buenos días. Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Carmen Mejía y vivo en el Distrito 7 de Washington, D.C. Y soy miembro del capítulo de D.C. de la Alianza Nacional de Trabajadoras y fui una de las muchas trabajadoras del hogar que lucharon durante los últimos 4 años para aprobar una carta de derechos para nosotras.
Hello, good morning. My name is Carmen Mejia. I live in Ward 7, and I am a member of the DC chapter of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. I was one of many domestic workers who fought over the last 4 years to pass a Bill of Rights.
He sido orgullosa trabajadora del hogar como limpiadora por más de 15 años y cuidadora de personas mayores por más de 10 años y también he sido una babysitter.
I have been a proud domestic worker, as a house cleaner for over 15 years, as a caregiver for the elderly for over 10 years, and I have also worked as a babysitter and nanny.
Cada día que hago este trabajo me doy cuenta que es muy importante nuestra labor para las personas adultas y es un poco difícil conectar con las personas adultas y hay que tener mucha empatía, mucho respeto y mucha paciencia para cuidarlos. Y es también muy difícil para nosotros cuando estas personas parten, cuando estas personas se van de nuestra vida, porque pasan a ser nuestra familia. Perdón que me emocione, pero acabo de perder a una señora que cuidé por 9 años y la enterramos el domingo. Es así de importante para nosotros y no es justo que nos discriminen.
Yeah, this work can be very difficult. And sometimes the challenges are connecting and having the empathy and patience. And a lot of this time it's very difficult as we form very close bonds with the people we are working with as well. They become part of our families. And I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. I just lost someone I cared for 9 years. We just buried them yesterday. But it's a testament to how strongly we feel and how close we become to these families.
Aunque también reconozco los desafíos y peligros que tenemos en algunos trabajos. Muchas veces he sido discriminada en algunos de mis trabajos. Por ejemplo, en una ocasión, como cuidadora, con una compañera fuimos juntas y las dos hablábamos español. Pero la dueña de la casa nos pidió que no habláramos español dentro de su casa. Lamentablemente, nosotros teníamos que explicarnos entre nosotras porque era una pareja de ancianos y teníamos que hablar en español entre nosotras.
Yeah, I also have to recognize the challenges, dangers, and discrimination that we face in the workplace. For example, among all the things that I have experienced, I will tell you that I felt discriminated against because of my language. I was working with a colleague and they asked me not to speak Spanish with another domestic worker. And that when they heard us speaking Spanish, they told us that we had to leave the house. We cannot speak Spanish in their house. And this was an elderly couple.
Y también nos discriminaron en nuestra comida. Nos dijeron que no podíamos, porque comíamos carne, y nos dijeron que no podíamos calentar en su microondas y nos mandaron a comer al garaje. Y estaba un invierno. Yo me puse a pensar, ¿cómo es posible que nos traten de esta manera cuando nosotros hacemos nuestro trabajo con mucho amor, dedicación y respeto? Y no tienen ese mismo respeto hacia nosotras. Tuvimos que comer afuera. Estas personas ya no pueden validarse por sí mismas.
Yeah, I've also felt discriminated because of food even. There was a moment where I was working with a colleague and I was told that because we were eating meat, not only could we not use the microwave, we couldn't heat up our food, but they also said that we had to go to the garage to eat. And this was in the middle of winter. It was very cold in the garage. And it really left quite an impression on me that these folks that we work so hard to take care of with so much dedication and so much respect, sometimes do not have the ability to give us that same sort of respect.
En otra ocasión, en otro trabajo también, sufrí abuso sexual. Esta persona no me pagó mi trabajo. Yo tuve que irme y no tuve dónde quejarme, no tuve dónde poder ir a poder hablar para que me ayudaran. Eso fue doble abuso para mí.
On another occasion, I experienced sexual abuse, which was a very traumatic experience. On top of that, they did not pay me. It was almost a double abuse, but what was one of the most difficult parts of that was that unfortunately in that moment, with that traumatic experience, I did not know where to turn. I didn't feel like I had anywhere to go to seek justice.
Justamente por eso estoy hoy día, para pedirles que por favor nos ayuden a que esto se haga una realidad. Es verdad que ya ganamos la carta, pero necesitamos que se haga una realidad. Y necesitamos que por favor implementen presupuesto para que podamos tener una línea telefónica en el momento que nosotros necesitamos hablar con alguien que nos escuche y que sea privada nuestra información. Y a enseñarle a nuestras compañeras que no tengan miedo, que no tengan el miedo que yo tuve por el estatus migratorio que tenemos. Muchas veces por el estatus que tenemos y porque no hablamos inglés, nosotros no nos desempeñamos a pedir una ayuda. Pero gracias a que ya se aprobó esta ley, queremos que también la hagan una realidad, que no solo sea un sí, sino que también nos den el dinero para que podamos tener folletos y otras ayudas para nosotras como empleadas. Es necesario implementarla. Ya no más. Otra mujer más abusada. No más. Yo grito que ya no más.
That's exactly why I'm here, because after we won our Bill of Rights for domestic workers, we were hoping that you all would be playing an important role in implementing this historic law that we've already won. And that's why I asked this committee to help us achieve the budget we need to make this a reality. I'm hoping that we can put together a phone line so that people can call and have their rights defended, so that they have someone to talk to when they have a complaint and when their human rights are being violated, while also committing to protecting our privacy. So we will no longer be afraid, because many of us are afraid of bringing forth a sort of complaint because of our immigration status and or because of the fact that we do not speak English. And so we don't just need a yes for this bill, but we need the material support so that there is tangible help for us. And I want to scream it from the rooftops, like there should not be any more women who are abused.
Confiamos en ustedes y en su conocimiento y sobre todo en su buena labor para con nosotros. Y por favor pedimos que esto lo aprueben. Es urgente. Necesitamos que aprueben ese presupuesto y que esta ley la pongan en práctica, que no solo sea un papel, como estoy cansada de que nos den siempre un papel y que no haya una realidad. Por favor, necesitamos su ayuda. Necesitamos urgente su ayuda, que estos documentos se hagan una realidad y que sean en inglés y en otros idiomas, tanto como en español.
We trust in you, in your knowledge, and above all, in your goodwill to ensure that our Bill of Rights is proclaimed, but also made viable and respected. This is urgent, and we hope that you pass the budget with funds for our programs so that we can put this bill into practice. We don't want it just to be a piece of paper that doesn't affect our lives and lives in a bookshelf somewhere. We need these documents to come alive and for these services to intervene in the very real reality of many of our workplaces. And we hope that these different services can also be not just in English, but in multiple languages. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Now we'll go to Sierra Cockrell.
Good morning. Good morning to the distinguished members of the Committee of Public Works and Operations. My name is Sierra Cockrell, and I'm a district resident of Ward 3. I'm a second-year law student at Howard University School of Law. I'm here with my colleague today, Natalie Mack, representing the Reentry Clinic at Howard Law. We have submitted written testimony to the committee on funding the Second Chance Act of 2022, and will speak today about why funding this act is of utmost importance. As I mentioned, Natalie and I are student attorneys in the Reentry Clinic. Our clients are DC residents, and we're helping them seal and expunge their criminal records by filing motions in the interest of justice and on the benefit of public safety. A large majority of our clients are dependent on the Second Chance Act of 2022 to be fully funded. We cannot file the motions without the act being funded, and we are asking the committee today to give us the opportunity to be able to file those motions on behalf of our clients. We would like to thank the council, you and your colleagues, for passing the Second Chance Act unanimously in 2022 and recognizing that the DC community is in need of this act now. The last piece is for this act to be funded. We urge the council to fund the Second Chance Act as soon as possible. This means amending the fiscal year 23 budget and funding the act in fiscal year 24, 25, and 26. In the fiscal impact statement, Chief Financial Officer Lee reported that the act requires $296,000 to be allocated to the budget of Office of Human Rights in fiscal year 24. We learned that the mayor has not budgeted money for this act until fiscal year 25. 2025 would put the DC community in far too much of a delay, delayed in efforts to seal and expunge certain criminal offenses, and delayed in promotion of public safety. This act was passed in 2022 and renewed hope for a number of our clients in the clinic. We cannot ask our clients to wait another year and a half before even getting the chance to file a motion. It is critical for those reasons that the committee include a line item in the Office of Human Rights budget for the funding of the Second Chance Act in the revised fiscal year 23 budget and the fiscal year 24 budget. DC residents need this act now. We've already waited 6 years for the bill to pass, and a delay forces DC residents to continue to operate under a draconian law, a law that puts DC behind most states with respect to barriers to reentry. Really, this is about public safety. The committee has recognized the importance of investment in violence prevention. The committee knows that funding reentry services is necessary to allow returning citizens to access stable housing and stable jobs. Where people have stable housing and stable jobs, there's less crime. In this way, funding the Second Chance Act of 2022 is investment in violence prevention and public safety. I imagine that's one of the reasons why this council unanimously passed this act. There are more offenses eligible to be sealed or expunged under this act, giving more DC residents a path towards stability and away from crime. Without funding, though, the efforts of this council in promoting public safety are delayed. What then should we tell our clients? Should we tell them to wait until 2025, that they aren't eligible? How long should they wait? And how long is too long? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Natalie Mack.
Good morning, distinguished members of the Committee on Public Works and Operations. My name is Natalie Mack. I'm also a second-year law student at Howard University School of Law, and I am also a student attorney with the Howard University's Reentry Clinic. So first and foremost, I would like to, on behalf of the Reentry Clinic, thank the Council for passing the Second Chance Act of 2022. The impact that this legislation will have once it goes into effect is immense, and we're excited to see how many lives will be changed because of it. It's crucial, however, that the Office of Human Rights allocate funding for the Act in its revised fiscal year 2023 budget, and that it add funding for the Act in its 2024 budget. To provide some context and to illustrate to you why this legislation is so crucial, I'd like to take some time to explain to you or to tell you about a client that I have had the opportunity to work with while I'm in the clinic. My client was arrested in 1995 for possession of cocaine. And waiting until 2025 to fund the Second Chance Act will effectively mean that she has to wait to walk around with this conviction weighing heavily on her shoulders for 30 years. Regardless of the fact that she has successfully completed her sentence, she's being asked to wait. This is regardless of the fact that she has overcome the disease of addiction, and regardless of the fact that she has successfully completed a rehabilitation program and been sober for well over 15 years. She today is a remarkable woman who does not even identify herself as an addict or anything that might relate to her past charge. In fact, she has said that the only thing that she has in common with the woman from 1995 is her fingerprint. Today, she is a loving family woman who cares so deeply for her family. She has a son that she loves dearly and is soon welcoming a granddaughter that she lights up about when she's speaking about. She has obtained her GED. She has obtained numerous certifications in the healthcare field. She served as valedictorian, got a 3.5 GPA in her associate's program, and she now works as someone who educates individuals in her community about kidney disease. She has a very strong hand in her community, is very passionate about the work that she does, and she is seen as a hard worker by those who work with her. Yet and still, my client has to face being denied better housing because of this conviction from the 1990s. She has told me about the conditions she lives in and how no one should be subjected to them, but this conviction continues to keep her there. She wants to continue growing in her career, but still faces being told no when she wants to obtain certain certifications, despite the fact that she has worked hard and is passionate and has put all of this into the field already. This conviction that she has had, that she has worked so hard to separate herself from constantly looms over her shoulder, holding her back whenever she tries to move forward. So my client does not deserve to keep hearing the word no when she's looking to obtain better housing or better career opportunities. Other clients in our clinic don't deserve to keep hearing no when they're trying to go back to school or participate in different community activities. And people in DC who have had any interaction with the justice system, whether it be an arrest or a conviction, don't deserve to keep hearing no when they're simply trying to rebuild their lives to continue growing. So why are we continuing to make them wait, and how long are we going to continue to make them wait? Again, today we are asking that the council revise the fiscal year 2023 budget to include funding for the Second Chance Act, and that it fund the act for fiscal year 2024 as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And thank you so much to this panel. I really appreciate the advocacy on today. We have in this panel 2 separate bills. So, you know, with the cuts to the committee, we're obviously going to be looking high and low to fund any new initiatives. Alana Eichner, if you're still here, I think you are. Yes,
Still here.
Have you all given any thought to places we could identify these funds? This is not an obligation, but I like to brainstorm. So
Not yet, but that's certainly something I can follow up with you about and I can talk to our friends who are better at scouring the budget for some funding sources than and send some suggestions.
Yeah, we always like to try to find whatever we can in our committee.
Yep,
From
okay.
my conversations with Chairman Mendelson, he's going to be doing his best to restore cuts and then quote new programs.
Right.
Won't have such high priorities. So that's a challenge. So if we can't find it, we can't count on him necessarily to find it. So that's just what I'm thinking. It's like, so, you know, but we're going to be looking around for all of this stuff. So,
great.
So that's it. If everyone can also just be helping think this through, we're obviously scouring as well, but it is always our goal to implement new initiatives and on them. So fantastic. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate you taking the time to come out and testify. We do have a second panel that we will be moving to now. Thank you. Okay, our next panel includes Michael Syndrome, who will be joining us by phone. Caitlin Holbrook, policy advocate with the DC Justice Lab, and Sophia Mitchell, policy attorney with First Shift Justice Project. We also did have signed up Danielle Duncan, Aid Hafid, and Wallace Short. If you two have joined, but just maybe have signed in under a different name, use the raise hand function so we can promote you. And then if there's anybody else in the Zoom today that wishes to testify about the Office of Human Rights, we will do another panel for OCTO. Just raise your hand and we can move you on to this panel, which will be our final panel for public witnesses on OCTO. I'm sorry, on OHR. Okay. All right. So, Michael Syndrome, I think we should now be able to hear you. Oh, one more second. I guess not quite yet. All right. We should now be able to hear you, Mr. Syndrome. Go ahead with your testimony. I'll let you know when you hit your 3-minute mark. Yes.
Michael Syndrome, disabled veteran, served our country more than most. It seems that the Office of Human Rights goes from bad to worse. Referring to a case OHR case number 19447 PA, hails from 2019. I just now received a dismissal notice in the mail that's postmarked March 21st, 2023. What gives? It involves an issue situation where Matt McCullough, the Director, Office of Disability Rights, witnessed I was prohibited from entering 441 4th Street to take care of official business. The African-American female guard, no training, I happen to be non-black, indicates you cannot enter the building. And I says, for what reason? We have a bar notice. So I asked her to produce the bar notice. She could not. She just says, I'm telling you, you can't come in. That ought not be. And there happened to be my photo, unauthorizedly taken of you, and that evidently was used as the fodder for bar notice. So Director McCullough said, well, where is the bar notice? Doesn't exist. And I still was not permitted to enter into the building and take care of what was necessary. So as an independent third-party witness, he was never interviewed in the case again, 19447 PA. The attorney for Security Assurance Management, Inc., and the guard security agencies there just changed names, but the faces remain. The counsel is Martin Posen, none other than Muriel, the mayor's personal lawyer. That was his staffer at the time, too. And so I've attempted repeatedly to get the case reinstated, reopened, whatnot, and it's fallen on 10 ears. This is not good. And if in one case can't get one right, I mean, what about the others that remain pending and acted upon? The point being is, when the rights of one are violated, the rights of all are endangered. And today it's me, and tomorrow it may be you, and so on and so forth. These things need to be taken in tandem. I hear always they're doing such a good job, and so they're not. They're just squashing cases for convenience sake. You recall last time they weighed in? Well, this is what means convenience sake. That's not justice. That's just squashing cases to make yourself look good. So this case needs to be reinstated. And again, I just received the dismissal like 4 years after the fact. That ought not be. And so that needs to be taken care of in tandem. I've since filed a complaint also with Scout Properties Management, Out of Control, and Eco DC. Nothing's been done. And actually there was a letter, Madam Chair, that was written to, at the time, Michelle Garcia, who was interim director. It's been resubmitted to Nan Khan, who is not only the interim director, but she's also general counsel, conflict of interest. And that letter dates back from May 8th of 2020, articulating with specificity more than one case for reopening motion that remains pending and acted upon, which ought not be. So I'm deferring to you, Madam Chair, take matters in hand for disabled veterans served our country more than most, to make certain that we have unfettered access, entry into the building and elsewhere. And I might add also, with the commission, when they did convene in person, the protective service would be there. And to muzzle, not only what I have to say, my constitutional right to say it, sad but true. I know that you've indicated Office of Human Rights, but it seems like the Human Rights Commission is also on tap as well. Might add that the budget is controlled by Director of Office of Human Rights for the Commission as well. And also the Director of the Office of Human Rights does the assessment, the appraisal for the chair of the Commission on Human Rights, which is clearly conflict of interest. There was one, actually the previous chair, his name escapes me at the moment, that was walked off premises, who enlisted the protective service to muzzle me. God don't like ugly. And so, again, bringing to your attention these matters for prompt action. And I want to conclude, after the disabled veteran, and hopefully this year we'll have at the DC VA Medical Center the Winter Haven that has been changed and no advance notice given to all concerned. I don't know if you were able to attend last year. I didn't know about it. And this year as well, if you can apprise me when it is, or we can, make it a collaborative effort. But I want to share something in conclusion. It is the veteran. It is the veteran, not preacher, who has given us. Oh, and before I do read this, one other thing too. There was a reprehensible action taken against the mediation manager. Don't want to mention her name, but she was there for 50 years. We could talk more offline about it. And because she declined to do an lawful act, Monica Plosio, the prior director, was terminated unlawfully, unfairly. And the comeback was, well, you serve at my pleasure. Not to do unlawful acts, no, that ought not be. So again, we can talk more. I don't want to mention that prior mediation manager's name, and I understand the current mediation manager is on his way out too. So there is a rift. There is a hole, a chasm that needs to be filled with competent mediation folks. As you may be aware, mediation is a mandatory requisite, and it often leads to fruitful closure of cases. Like it's been said, a productive mediation, both sides walk away not happy. You don't get everything you ask for, but you get something, and something is better than nothing. And I found in life, when you want to settle for the full enchilada instead of settling for a piece of it, you wind up with nothing. And again, mandatory mediation is just that, mandatory.
Thank you, Mr. Syndrome. Did you want to do your wrapping?
But I wanted to say this, that the mandatory mediation requires both parties come to the table acting in good faith with settlement authority. In the past,
yes, I am familiar, but we're 4 minutes over. I do know how mediation works, but we're
that's
4
right.
minutes over now,
I am there, Madam Chair, because you are there because I am here. In a few moments over, I got to roll. My phone's going to cut off. Be a little bit accommodating to a disabled veteran, okay? So the deal is, it is the veteran, and I don't think you're veteran, and so take that into consideration. It is the veteran. not preacher, who has given us freedom of religion. It is the veteran, not reporter, who has given us freedom of the press. It is the veteran, not poet, who has given us freedom of speech. It is the veteran, not campus organizer, who has given us freedom to assemble. It is the veteran, not lawyer, who has given us right to a fair trial. I was going to say liar, but lawyer, who's given right to a fair trial. It is the veteran, not politician, who has given us the right to vote, and also for recall. I understand there's one going on your end. It is the veteran who salutes the flag, who serves under the flag. God bless America and our troops. I would be delighted to field questions. You know, the government is not untied.
Mr. Syndrome, can you just give me, I just have one question. Can you tell me that case number again? And then I got to let you go.
Absolutely. It's always case number. It's captioned Michael Syndrome versus Security Assurance Management, Inc. OHR case number 19447 PA. It emanates back from the 2019, and I just recently received dismissal notice, which ought not be. I've alerted powers to be. Akita Smith, indicates we don't know, and I've sent everything in. Another thing, too, that when I go down there to file, or I can't because I'm crippled and I'm blind, basically, legally blind with cataract and fused hip, my courier is turned away. David Aniva, who taken upon himself, we're not going to take this.
Yeah, I listen, we'll follow up. We can't get into all of this right this second, but I appreciate it. And very much appreciate your service. Thank you, Mr. Syndrome. Okay, so our next witness is Caitlin Holbrook, Policy Advocate at the DC Justice Lab. Thank you.
Hello, Councilmember Nadeau and members of the committee staff. Thank you for holding this budget oversight hearing. My name is Caitlin Holbrook. I'm a policy advocate and research associate for the DC Justice Lab and a resident of Ward 6. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify on behalf of my organization today and in support of funding the full FY24 fiscal impact statement of the Second Chance Amendment Act in the Office of Human Rights. In her FY24 budget presentation, the mayor stated that she included funding for the Second Chance Amendment Act. However, in reviewing each agency's budget tables for the upcoming year, there's actually no funding for the Second Chance Amendment Act in FY24. Through staff at the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, we learned that funding for implementation is set to begin at the Metropolitan Police Department in FY25, but no funding has been assigned for any year in the Office of Human Rights or the Department of Motor Vehicles, the other two agencies implicated in the bill's fiscal impact statement. DC Justice Lab recommends that the committee increase the proposed FY24 operating budget for the Office of Human Rights by the $296,000 required for the implementation of the Second Chance Amendment Act. Then $296,000 can be reallocated from MPD's $516 million budget. As I noted during the DMV's budget oversight hearing, announcing that funding is beginning in FY24 when it is not is misleading and devastating to people's hope, particularly as DC residents have already waited 6 years for this specific legislation to pass and much longer for record sealing and expungement eligibility to expand in DC. People should not have to arbitrarily wait to begin expunging and sealing their records under this law. And for this reason, I also urge the committee to amend the FY23 budget to start funding now so people with criminal records do not have to wait another 6 more months for relief. Since, as stated in the bill, the Second Chance Amendment Act's provisions will begin to apply only once its fiscal effect is included in the approved budget and financial plan. The Second Chance Amendment Act was developed to expand record sealing and expungement to reduce the number of people in DC facing barriers that criminal records cause, such as being barred from accessing housing, employment, education, and social services. 1 in 7 district residents has a criminal record, but only half of them have actual criminal convictions. Criminal records, whether an individual is criminally convicted and served their time or never convicted of a crime, should not be a life sentence. Criminal record sealing and expungement is a public safety issue because barring people from accessing housing, employment, education, and social services is barring them from all of the supports required for any individual to succeed and have an upward trajectory in life. The Second Chance Amendment Act is an investment in our residents and a relief from the perpetual punishment that occurs within and because of our justice system. Currently, the MPD has a difficult time accurately and timely sealing records even under the old law. So it's imperative that a remedy be put in place when the new law is implemented. Without a remedy for when employers, landlords, and others continue to discriminate against those with criminal records, the bill will not meet its intended effect. The implementation of the Second Chance Amendment Act through the Office of Human Rights provides this remedy. This is why it is imperative that OHR has all of the resources it needs to enforce this law. Criminal record sealing and expungement is also a racial justice issue. 86% of people arrested in the district are Black. 94% of people sentenced with felonies in DC are Black. And 91% of people currently incarcerated in our jails are Black. The discrimination of people with criminal records intersects with the historical and persistent discrimination based on race and class in the District of Columbia. The Second Chance Amendment Act recognizes the ongoing discrimination and barring from services and resources by service providers in the district against residents with criminal records by providing a process for people with criminal history reports eligible under the legislation to file complaints if discriminated against for their criminal history in violation of the bill. This process will inevitably increase the number of complaints needing to be received and investigated, and will be a different type of complaint than previously required to be processed and analyzed by the Office of Human Rights. The $296,000 in the legislation's fiscal impact statement will allow the OHR to hire additional employees to investigate these complaints. Per the recommendation in the bill, these new hires for FY24 should include a program manager and an outreach specialist to establish and communicate to the public in an accessible way the policies and procedures for this new complaint process. The Second Chance Amendment Act is a step in the right direction regarding DC's record sealing and expungement scheme, which historically has been exclusionary, convoluted, and without a process to remedy discrimination when it occurs against DC residents with a criminal record. By funding this bill, tens of thousands of district residents will soon be eligible for their records to be expunged and sealed with the promise that their lives can finally move forward. We must follow through with this promise with the financial investments that will support this relief for so many DC residents from unnecessary and overly punitive barriers by providing protections when the relief that this bill provides is undermined by those that violate the bill and continue to discriminate. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I thank you once again for your time and the opportunity to speak on this important legislation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Sophia Mitchell.
Good morning, Council Member. Thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony regarding the proposed budget for fiscal year 2024 and the impact it will have on the Office of Human Rights. My name is Sophia Mitchell, and I am a policy attorney at First Shift Justice Project, a nonprofit legal organization with the mission to help working parents assert their workplace rights to prevent job loss. For many years, First Shift has represented working parents at OHR. We appreciate the opportunity to share our experiences with the committee. For the past 5 years, First Shift has worked with the local chapter of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, as well as others, to advocate for changes in DC law that will allow house cleaners, nannies, in-home caregivers for elderly and disabled people, and other household workers to be treated the same as other workers under the law. We were thrilled that the Domestic Worker Employment Rights Amendment Act of 2022 was one of the final bills to pass at the end of the last session. The exclusion of domestic workers from DC's Human Rights Act and other basic workplace protection dates back to chattel slavery in the United States, and domestic workers in DC have been fighting for many years to reverse this exclusion, and we are happy to witness the fruition of this labor. As a legal services provider, we are particularly invested in the implementation of the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights, as we will be directly assisting domestic workers to exercise the rights provided by this law. The Office of Human Rights is charged with developing, maintaining, and making available written guidance documents about common forms of discrimination in the employment of domestic workers and guidance for employers on how to comply with the DC Human Rights Act. The OHR will also have the responsibility of enforcing protections against workplace discrimination for domestic workers under the DCHRA when the law becomes effective this year. The rights conveyed by this new law are unlike other employment protections because they involve household employers who often do not identify as employers and workers who are isolated to individual households with no colleagues or human resources department. Additionally, domestic workers who are generally Black and Brown women and may speak a first language other than English are in an especially precarious situation, as these groups have been historically discriminated against in the workplace. The OHR will need to approach outreach differently to effectively reach both employers and domestic workers. However, there was no funding allocated across any agency to implement the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. The Office of Human Rights will need funding to hire staff to lead outreach and investigations and ensure that staff has essential resources needed to serve DC workers, such as interpretation and translation services, equipment, IT, and other fringe costs. Without this funding, the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights will be a law in name alone. This funding is essential to creating the resources and team necessary to implement the law. We support the National Domestic Workers Alliance in their recommendation that the committee allocate $354,000 for the Office of Human Rights for the implementation of this law in the fiscal year of 2024. This funding will give meaning to the law that passed in December and the council's expressed commitment to ensure that household workers in DC be treated equitably in comparison to all other workers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate all three of you. And we definitely will be looking through our budget to see if there's any way that we can fund these priorities. While also trying to address the cuts. So it will be a challenge, but we do care about them. So I don't think I have any particular questions, but just want to thank everybody for their testimony today. Okay, so now we're going to call our only panel of public witnesses for the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. The two witnesses we have signed up are Carolyn Petty, member of the DC Archives Advocacy Group, Advisory Group, and Fritz Mulhauser, co-chair of the Legal Committee of the DC Open Government Coalition. And I'll just ask at this time if there's anybody else in the Zoom that wishes to testify for OCTO, if you could use the raise hand function so we can promote you now, as this will be the first and only panel for OCTO. Okay, so we will begin with Carolyn when you're ready. And Fritz, just mute yourself for now, just in case, if you don't mind. Thank you. Go ahead, Carolyn. Oh, you can unmute yourself. You're up. There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you and good morning, Council Member. My name is Caroline Petty, and I'm testifying today on behalf of the Council of the District of Columbia's Archives Advisory Group. The AAG was established by the Council to advise on matters associated with the development of a new state-of-the-art archives for the District of Columbia. Once it is developed, the new archives will house the district's historic documents and be a locus for research on and understanding of the district's rich history. The Office of the Chief Technology Officer will play a critical role in the success of the district's new archives. Digital technology and the performance of those systems in terms of the management, security, and public accessibility of archival records will be crucial. Two areas in particular warrant special emphasis. First, a software system must be procured for preservation of electronic records destined for permanent storage and to effectuate the transfer of such records to the DC archives for safekeeping and public access. Second, design planning of the building, the archives building, is now underway. To ensure that the intake, preservation, and accessibility of digital archival materials are properly addressed, OCTO should actively engage with the DC's Department of General Services, Hartman Cox Architects, and the Office of the Secretary, including the State Archivist, and others in the design of the new facility. OCTO should ensure that adequate staff time and attention is allocated to focus on these and other important archives-related activities. Fiscal year 2024 is a critical year for the new archives. Mayor Bowser is requesting $103 million for the project. AAG hopes that the Committee on Public Works and Operations will support the mayor's request, and more specifically, will encourage OCTO to engage in earnest on the critical IT systems needed to ensure a world-class facility for the District of Columbia. Thank you for your attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll make sure to ask the OCTO team about their collaboration on this.
Thank you.
Mr. Mulhauser?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Council Member and members of the committee. I'm Fritz Mulhauser. I'm co-chair of the Legal Committee of the DC Open Government Coalition. We're a community organization devoted to advocacy for open records of government, open meetings of government, and open data. The agency asks for $90 million, a whopping sum, and it's even larger when you consider that other specific agencies purchase services. But this does fund the people and the systems which are vital to all of urban government, as all of us learned during the pandemic period of a few years ago, when services by virtual connection were essential.
Oh, Fritz, after you just said the word essential, you somehow muted yourself. All right,
Okay.
Here you go.
Here's the reason we're before you on OCTO today. A huge share of the agency's work comes from what they call client agencies. That makes sense. They serve other parts of DC government. But that means that these other agencies define the public that will be served and the metrics which define good service. We ask that you examine the OCTO budget and plans to see that there are resources to address citywide issues beyond those raised in the individual client interactions. Technically capable leadership is in short supply throughout government, but it's crucial to avoid the normal tendency of agencies to use their discretion to save money on politically invisible expenditures like technology. No one gets elected because city websites work better or forms for applying for benefits were comprehensible instead of nutty. Tech details are unsung, and leadership can play a vital role in helping all of government see better ways to do their work. Here are 5 areas where we think that there are citywide concerns that OCTO should pay more attention to, and which are impossible to see in their budget. 1, FOIA compliance. Committees have written about this. The head of OCTO has spoken about it. FOIA compliance is a citywide problem. Email storage is perennial on their mind. Search is on the minds of all users. Capture of ephemeral messages needs attention, with new legislation from the council that says those are public records. And a court case is just about to tell all agencies to start publishing agency materials mandated by the e-FOIA part of the FOIA law. Big work and lots of attention to government-wide agency compliance. 2, setting policy and schedule for digitizing government records government-wide. The federal government has been at this for almost a decade. It's a huge job. It's heading for all of us, and OCTO needs to be in the leadership role so that digital records become a reality. 3rd, planning for the archive. As Caroline Petty just described, it's an essential part of the design. And architects and archivists know about shelves and boxes. The plain fact is that digital records are the new records of government, and leadership from technically sophisticated folks like OCTO is a vital resource. Not yet connected, mentioned in last year's committee reports also. 4th, data management government-wide is an essential topic, and I see only one person in that category in their staffing. Public access to government data is a work in progress. We look today to see the annual report of the Chief Data Officer, which was due this month. It's not there. What's going on? I think the position has been vacant for a year. Data sharing within and outside government is almost unworkable. I'm involved in a number of outside research projects, and it's taken a year to negotiate data access. Government agencies themselves had to come to the council to get permission to share data. OCTO can provide sophisticated technical leadership to solve data management and access issues. And last, there are exciting technology opportunities to connect citizens with their government better The New America Foundation spent a long webinar recently showcasing some of these, and it's an area that can be explored, again, with technical leadership. The leadership of our technology effort in DC government can be stronger. OCTO is busy with its clients. We have recommended that there should be an Office of Electronic Government entirely separate with statutory authority to set standards for government provision of electronic services. We hope that could still be on the committee's radar. The OCTO budget report doesn't give us confidence that there are the resources for these important broad tech topics. OCTO has reached out to us to begin conversations this year with a series of scheduled conversations, the first of which is this week, and we're highly optimistic that good starts set by Lindsay Parker will be followed through by her staff as she moves on. Please look at the budget and do the oversight over the remainder of the year, following up on all the requests for information that were in last year's budget report. There were over a dozen. OCTO needs to be guided to give the leadership that the city technology needs. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Truly, truly appreciate it. Thank you to you both. You have given us plenty to chew on here in our new committee, and we'll keep working on these issues. Thank you. All right. I'm going to turn now to our government witness for the Office of Human Rights. Give us a minute to get this set up because we are promoting a number of panelists from the office, but they will include Director Nin Kane, Andrea Gopalrud, General Counsel, Ayana Lee, Chief Administrative Officer, Rosa Carrillo, Language Access Director, Adriana Dean, Agency Fiscal Officer, and in the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. Before we begin testimony, we'll have everybody who is going to be speaking today in any capacity take the oath. And very seamlessly. And all right. Director, you are on you're signed in as Andrea. Do you want to change that, or we can change that for you?
Yeah, let's change that. I'm sorry, I couldn't find a link this morning, so I had to use.
Oh, no problem. You're here, and that's what matters.
Yes.
I think we can help do that. If not, we will. Oh, there you go. Look at you. Okay, great. And I see Andrea is also here. You just get her to turn on her camera. There you go. Okay, so I will want to hear you when you answer me. So do you swear or raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give to the Committee on Public Works and Operations is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
Great. Director, you may begin your testimony. For everybody else, mute yourself. Great.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Nadeau, committee members, and staff of the Committee on Public Works and Operations. I'm Nin Kine, proud director of the District Office of Human Rights. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today. As you know, the district is facing a challenging budgetary year in 2024. And as a result, we've had to work hard to make tough choices. For OHR, the mayor's proposed budget for FY24 is $8.58 million, which comprises $8.18 million in local funds and $400,000 in federal funds. The mayor has also provided $100,000 in capital budget for OHR's case management system. While OHR will experience an adjustment in a net reduction of 6.5 FTEs, the proposed FY24 budget will support a total of 65 FTEs to pursue OHR's mission and core functions. In addition, 5 FTEs are currently supported by the Universal Paid Leave Fund through an MOU with the Department of Employment Services. As you know, OHR's mission is to eradicate discrimination, increase equal opportunity, and protect human rights in our city. OHR achieves this mission through investigation, mediation, conciliation, public hearing, and prosecution of probable cause cases before the Commission on Human Rights. Our jurisdiction is expansive and includes employment, housing, education, places of public accommodation, and access to government services. At its core, OHR enforces civil rights laws, provides public education, and executes equity and compliance programs. OHR is responsible for enforcing approximately 16 local laws and several federal laws, including Titles 7 and 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, and the Americans with Disabilities Act, to name just a few. Over the last decade, OHR has seen consistent expansion in the number and breadth of local laws it enforces as the district strives to be a leader in civil rights. FY23 and 24 are no stranger to this precedent. In FY23, OHR became responsible for enforcing 5 new laws as follows. 1, the Cannabis Employment Protections Amendment Act. 2, the Restroom Medical Necessity Act. 3, the Sexual Harassment Data Collection Act. 4, the Human Rights Enhancement Amendment Act. And 5, parts of the Eviction Record Sealing Authority and Fairness in Renting Amendment Act. The first 2 laws have not been funded by council, and thus OHR has not been able to implement these provisions. Though no funding was authorized for the Sexual Harassment Data Collection Act, OHR has leveraged its internal partnerships by working with the Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel and DCHR to collect the data required under the law. The latter 2 laws, the Human Rights Enhancement Amendment Act and parts of the Eviction Record Sealing Authority Act, brought several significant changes in housing rights and rights for our most vulnerable population, namely those experiencing homelessness, and significant changes also to the way we interpret harassment claims in the district. I'm pleased to inform you that our teams worked diligently to create educational materials, train our internal employees and the public, and update our processes and systems to fully enforce these new laws. We also worked with our community partners to amplify our voice, and we continue to do so on an ongoing basis. This calendar year, another new law called, as we've heard, the Domestic Worker Employment Rights Amendment Act went into effect. OHR's understanding is that, as mentioned during our performance oversight hearing, council will add funding for this law in FY24. We look forward to learning more whether or not council will be able to do so, given the budgetary constraints the district is facing in FY24. Earlier in March of this year, the Second Chance Amendment Act also became law. Starting in 2026 and beyond, OHR will be responsible for enforcing Title II of this law, which prohibits background providers from reporting criminal history information related to records that have been sealed, expunged, or set aside, and authorizes the office to adjudicate complaints and provides penalties for violations of this prohibition. A large part of OHR's work involves educating the community about the laws it enforces. While we issue special materials and tailored sessions to educate the public about new laws, OHR also provides a recurring educational training series that cover all of the laws we enforce. In addition to these general training sessions, our teams working on language access, youth bullying prevention, and safer spaces also provide regular training and resources to our communities in these specific areas. But our education effort is not limited to training alone. It includes producing reports like the Language Access Annual Report and the Youth Bullying Prevention Biannual Report, working with the Mayor's Office of Racial Equity to develop and produce training and guidance materials for advancing racial equity in district government, and holding community engagement events like OHR's listening labs, open houses, and the Human Rights Gala. Our upcoming events in April include a listening lab on language access as we celebrate the 19th anniversary of the Language Access Act, and a panel discussion to promote anti-discrimination laws and housing as we also celebrate Fair Housing Month in April. As you may recall, at our performance oversight hearing in February, I shared with this committee priorities for the remainder of FY23 and FY24. Some of the key priorities were: 1, improving our case processing along with related public information, and 2, completing our case management system and IT system investments. The current budget will allow OHR to achieve these goals in FY23 and 24. We also set out to invest in our people through robust recruiting, hiring, and retention. To that end, I am thrilled to share OHR just recently onboarded a new HR specialist along with a senior advisor and an investigator. Our next hires include a dedicated fellow for our hearing unit, an enforcement manager, an investigator, an attorney advisor, and 2 associate directors. With regard to retention efforts, OHR will work with DCHR to take advantage of the mayor's $2.5 million investment in government-wide recruiting and retention fund. In closing, I'd like to reiterate that this is a difficult budget period for the district, and we appreciate everyone's efforts. I want to thank the dedicated team at OHR for the hard work as we face new, unprecedented challenges. We are thankful for the support that we have received from the mayor and Deputy Mayor Apia. I also want to thank our community partners for their relentless advocacy and assistance. Finally, I would also like to thank you, Chairperson Nadeau, and the council for leading the district in civil rights changes and ensuring that OHR is supported in the process. This concludes my testimony, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Director. Okay. This is the 3rd budget cycle where we've gotten to work with the Council Office on Race Equity, but since it's the first year that I have this committee, I want to ask some questions that will help me better understand any racial disparities that may exist in agency operations. In your proposed FY24 budget, are there specific programs or allocations that are specifically designed to address racial or economic inequities faced by district residents? If you could describe those.
Sure. Thank you, Council Member. I would say that the entire mission of OHR impacts racial equity, given that our goal is to eradicate and prevent discrimination that includes discrimination based on race. That said, we do have a dedicated full-time employee to work with the Mayor's Office of Racial Equity to develop things like training and resource materials for district government usage.
Right. In your proposed FY24 budget, which reductions may burden certain communities more than others? If applicable, what strategies has your department taken to mitigate any potential adverse impacts?
At this point, Chairperson, I'm not seeing any impacted communities based on our budget for FY24.
Thank you. How much of the agency's data is collected or disaggregated by race? Are there performance or operational data points that can be collected by race that aren't currently?
So with respect to our cases, we certainly collect data based on how many complaints of race discrimination we get. And so I can tell you that's about 314, I believe, are the number of cases that we see a year based on race. And race, of course, is one of the top 3 protected traits alleged in under the Human Rights Act.
But in general, the data you're collecting, are you requesting race identification?
Not from every complainant, no.
Okay.
We only get race information if someone checks the box race as a form or basis for their discrimination complaint.
Okay, thank you. All right. As part of the next budget season, how could community members, especially communities of color and low-income communities, be engaged or consulted to identify programming or service needs for your department?
Certainly, as you know, we hold a number of listening labs, which we brought back after COVID, and we're so happy to have them. And we hold them about two or three times a year. We also have our open houses, which the next one is just this Thursday, April 6th, from 12 to 2 p.m. So if anyone is interested, you are welcome to attend those sessions. Additionally, we hold, I want to say, quarterly community-based organization meetings. And so again, all are welcome to that meeting where I sit down with our community-based advocacy groups to determine what is at issue in the various communities that they serve. And so, yes, I welcome all communities that are impacted by the human rights, which of course is so huge and important in the district.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to your budget. What federal grants do you anticipate receiving in FY24?
So I think that warrants a little bit of clarification with respect to federal grants for OHR. OHR does not have federal grants per se, but what you might be seeing is that we have a work sharing agreement with the EEOC and HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Agency under the US agencies. And so with those federal agencies, we conduct a number of investigations related to Fair Housing Act for housing, and then Title VII and some other laws I mentioned earlier for EEOC. In exchange for that work sharing agreement, we get funding.
Got it.
It's
So
pay
you're
for
being
service.
Paid for service, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, I see. Do you rely on any federal grants for core functions?
When you mean those funding, yes, we do fund about approximately 2.5 positions that are funded through the monies received from that work share agreement.
Got it.
And some other non-personnel service activities.
And you expect those to that arrangement to continue?
Absolutely.
Okay. In your testimony, you noted the agency will experience a net reduction of 6.5 FTEs, but according to the budget books, it shows there's a 9.8 reduction of FTEs. Could you explain that discrepancy?
Sure. So the net decrease in FTEs is the 9.8 you're seeing, but the actual reduction in funds affecting FTEs is only 6.5. And that is because the other 3.3 were used by the agency to compensate for increased salaries, incentives, COLA differentials, and that sort of thing, and perhaps some other things I'm not thinking of right at the moment. The actual loss of FTEs is 6.5.
Okay. I saw also a net increase of 2 contract employees. What's the reason for the increase in, that's in CSG 12? What's the reason for the increase of FTEs in CSG 12?
So my understanding, and as I said before, I'm still, learning the tentacles that is the budget. But CSG 12 is for term employees. And so I believe with some of the fluctuations in the number of permanent FTEs and some term employees, that was just the fluctuation, but that doesn't affect our total FTE count, of course.
And then what's the reason for the decrease under CSG 11?
I think that is some of the reductions that you see from the 6.5 FTE is reflecting those changes in CSG 11.
Okay, and these are vacancies?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And then it seems the agency has shifted about 3 FTEs from CSG 11 to 12 under activity 2020 public education. Is that what you were talking about earlier with the fluctuation?
I think that's right, but I might let my AFO, Adrena Deans, confirm.
Yeah, it'd be good to understand, Ms. Dean, sort of what that fluctuation is, sort of how it impacts people day to day, if that's possible.
As far as the impact for the positions, it depends on where the status of the position is during formulation. So I believe when the agency would first bring a position on, they would start as a term and then eventually go to continuing. So there will always be that fluctuation between CSG 11 and 12, just depending on where that position is as far as being vacant or filled at the time of formulation.
So is that a common practice at the agency to bring someone on as term and then make them permanent? Or is that for a particular job?
I think I will have to defer to Ayana on that particular question.
Good morning. Good morning, council member. Yes, that is a common practice. Generally, employees are probationary for 1 year. Once they pass that 1 year probationary period, then they're moved into a career service permanent position.
Thank you. Under CSG 40, other services and charges, there's a total reduction of $105,470. However, the majority of this reduction, $96,669, is in activity 2030 investigations. What's the reason for the reduction to CSG 40 under the investigations activity?
Director, did you want to take that question?
Yes, I think I'll let Ms. Dean start us off and then I can respond if necessary.
Sure. So there were a number of changes or reductions made. So I will just list each of the reductions and I will let the agency speak on the impact to those reductions. There was a reduction of $51,136 because it was a one-time funded item in FY23, and that was for the implementation of the Human Rights Enhancement Amendment Act of FY21. There was a small increase in fleet of $449 just because the estimate for fleet did go up. There was a reduction of $23,021 for the implementation of the eviction for selling enforcement, a reduction of $1,000 in office support, a small reduction of $129 in postage, and there was also a reduction of $26,384 in professional services and contracts. In CSG 40, there was actually an increase of $5,000 for the sign language MOU, but that $5,000 was moved from contract, so it was really a net of zero for that particular reduction.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Additionally, I see a 6.6 FTE reduction in activity 2030 investigations. That's about a 16% reduction in this activity. What's the reason for the 6.6 FTE reduction?
I think that would, and Ms. Dean will correct me if I'm mistaken, but that's the same reflection of the decreases we've been talking about in the 6.5 reductions, more or less. Is that right, Ms. Dean?
That would be correct.
Mm-hmm. And again, those are vacancies?
Correct.
Okay. In the agency's FY24 attachment 1, responding to the Common Budget Office questions, the agency appears to be issuing a grant of $41,000 for work under Activity 2030 investigation support. What's the purpose of this grant and what services will it cover?
That usually supports our contractors for our enforcement unit, as well as law clerks.
Overall, I have a particular concern regarding the agency's backlog of cases. We discussed in the performance oversight hearing that in April of last year, OHR requested to reprogram $600,000 from the personnel budget to address an ongoing case backlog by bringing on an additional investigation support. And then you testified that the office filled those positions and made some progress with backlog. But how will the reduction in CSG 40 and the reduction in FTEs affect the agency's ability to conduct its investigations work fully and in a timely manner?
So as you'll recall, we did fill all of our, what we call our SWAT team, our special work assignment team, who is focusing on our older or age cases. And so because they fully came on in about June or July of last calendar year, we should be seeing more impact with respect to reduction in those cases this year. And so there should be no impact with reductions to that work because, as I mentioned, the reductions are of vacant positions. And I should also add a lot of those reductions are also new positions. So none of those existing positions are being impacted based on the current reductions. Okay,
and the reductions, how will they impact the current backlog of cases?
I'm not anticipating that there should be an impact unless we get more cases. If the trend continues as we've seen so far this year, which is we're on par we're getting about the same number of cases, which is about 1,000 on average a year, then I'm not anticipating an impact on our efforts to reduce our aged cases.
What are some things that could impact the number of cases you're receiving that you see in the current political realm?
You rephrase that a little bit, or?
Well, are there any things that council is implementing or you see happening in the world that could increase your case counts the way, maybe not as significantly as we did in some areas with COVID, but things like that?
I don't know that I anticipate any increase in cases other than new cases based on the new laws that we've been talking about this morning. The other part of enforcing that I always like to remind folks is that although we have our staff and employees, we are always, OHR, as you know, is at a place of growth. So we are always making sure there's sufficient infrastructure for management and oversight of that growth. But in terms of the number of cases, I don't anticipate a larger set, other than as we see that the Eviction Record Sealing and Rental Amendment Act, some of the penalties kicked in a little later, which is April 1st. And so we might see more of those housing tenant screening cases in the latter part of the year in quarters 3 and 4. Mm-hmm. And so currently we have a small increase in our source of income discrimination cases as a result of that law, which, as you know, of course, expanded what it means to have a source of income discrimination case in DC. So we have seen a small increase in that realm, but I don't know how much more we'll see with respect to the second part of that law, which is about tenant screening violations rather than source of income discrimination cases. So we'll certainly be in touch with you in the next couple of months or so as we see an increase in cases, if we do.
Yeah, what options do you have at that time if you feel like you need more support?
It depends on the increase. If it's a small increase, we should be able to absorb it with the current set of FTEs that we have. But if it's a larger, more significant increase, we'll certainly be in touch with our budget office, as well as whoever else is involved in that budget process at that point, to raise a flag that this might be a concern.
Okay. You've mentioned housing a couple times. The agency's Fair Housing Program was established in 1999 to eradicate discrimination in housing in the District of Columbia. In addition to enforcing local and federal fair housing laws, it conducts annual education campaigns and outreach events. Do you think the Fair Housing Program is adequately funded this year?
I do, yes.
I see that under CSG 11, there's a total sweep of funds of $15,742. While this is only a reduction of less than a single FTE, why does the agency no longer need a part-time employee working on this program?
Can you repeat that? I'm not sure what that is referring to.
Yeah, CSG 11. There is, let me see if I have the chart in front of me. Yep. A regular pay contract full-time, $15,742. And that is zeroed out.
I can't immediately think of what that might be reflecting. So if it's okay, Chairperson, I will get back to you more specifically.
Okay. We'll be here a little while, so if anybody figures it out while we're talking, can feel free to interrupt with that information.
And if I get that information from my staff, I'll certainly chime in and add it.
Great. Under CSG 41 contractual services, other, I see there was no reduction from the previous year. The proposed budget retains a funding level of $200,000. How is that funding being used, and who is the recipient of the contract? And what are the
So that funding is used to support our look into source of income discrimination in DC, and the recipient, we're working through that as we speak with respect to the actual scope of work for that particular project.
So you're.
I should clarify, we do have a recipient, but they've asked for some changes that then OHR has to determine whether or not the changes are something we can live with. And so that's why I don't want to say who the recipient is at this point, because if, we don't know whether those changes are going to move ahead or not.
Well, I understand the contract might be changing, but I do think it's reasonable to talk about who your contractor is for this.
I can couch it this way. The contractor that we're considering, I'm just trying to be clear here, is ERC, the Equal Rights Center.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And would the cost stay the same based on how the negotiations result?
Well, that's the thing. I don't know, because there are some changes that we have to work through that will impact the scope of work and in translation, the dollars related to those changes in the scope of work.
When do you expect to resolve the conversation?
We are in the midst of conversations right now, between this week and next week, I would say.
Okay. Thank you. A large part of OHR's work involves educating the community about the laws it enforces. I noticed the budget for the language access oversight was flat. Will services be impacted without an incremental increase?
Sorry, can you repeat that last part, Chairperson?
Will any services be impacted without an incremental increase? Okay. Let's briefly discuss the Commission on Human Rights. I see there was a shift of 1 FTE from CSG 11 to CSG 12, which saves, which brings the Commission's FTE total to 2. Can you explain the reason for the shift?
Sure. So I believe it was last fiscal year that we converted one of the ALJ positions into a fellow position. And so that is the cause of that shift.
How does that impact their workflow to have that be a fellow versus a FTE?
It shouldn't. This was a decision made in conjunction with the chief ALJ. And so looking at the number of cases that are pending at the commission, which on average is around, I want to say 20 cases, it should not impact the work based on the number of ALJs there.
But is that a 1-year term?
For the fellow?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And so we renew the contract every year with a different fellow. And we are currently using Georgetown's program for that.
Which is great. I just wonder on a team that's so small, if it's a challenge to lose that institutional memory on an annual basis.
You can, certainly reconsider and think about how we structure that.
Yeah, I there's a lot of benefit to having fellows throughout government. Having had them in our office before, I just know that you spend a lot of time getting someone up to speed and then you lose them. So just thinking out loud a little bit. Let's discuss the Domestic Workers Employment Rights Amendment Act. This law went into effect earlier this year. I'm proud to have co-introduced the legislation and what it achieved. However, as you know, the law is subject to appropriation. The fiscal impact statement for the act says that it will cost OHR approximately $1.3 million over the financial plan. I know we discussed during the performance oversight hearing, the office has not yet implemented the law due to funding. Do you believe this is an accurate estimate of the cost of implementing the law still?
I would have to say, I believe so at this time. What I'm seeing is 2 FTEs and then a 0.5 temporary FTE for the start off year, and then total NPS cost of $32,000 between outreach equipment and supplies and some space costs. So, again, it's always hard to say until we see the number of cases, but at this time, I think that would be sufficient, at least to start us off for the next year.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if council was able to identify funding for the bill, would OHR be able to implement it in FY24?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I see that the Second Chance Amendment Act is similarly situated. My understanding is the mayor intends to fund it in FY26. However, if council were to find funding for this bill as well, would OHR be able to implement the law in FY24?
Add that, and I can have our general counsel, Andrea Goplerud, chime in if you need more details. But I should add that we are not anticipating getting cases at OHR until mid of 2025. Calendar year 2025, as I believe the expungement provision doesn't even go into effect until January 2025. And so I think funding would certainly be helpful in 25, but I don't think that 24 would be necessary.
Got it. Very helpful. Well, those are all the questions that I have for you, Director. And I really appreciate your responsiveness, all and the whole team being here today. And thank you for all that you do.
Of course, and if I can just take a moment, I may not be appropriate, but I want to say thank you to my team, but also happy birthday to our Chief Administrative Officer, Ayana Lee, who worked through the weekend to prepare for this, despite it being her birthday.
Well, I'll allow it. Happy birthday, Ms. Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Have a great day.
It's a good thing we're not in person because there's a song that I do, but only in person. You're spared.
I'll hold you to
Okay,
that.
maybe next year. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
We'll now be joined by Lindsay Parker, Chief Technology Officer. Give us a second if we have to set up this panel. Lindsay Parker, Chief Technology Officer at OCTO, Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief Technology Officer, Michael Rupert, Associate Chief Technology Officer for Customer Experience at also at OCTO. We might need a brief recess. It looks like we might be ahead of the team here. And they have not yet joined the Zoom. So let us take a 10-minute recess while we figure that out. Thank you. Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Sorry, we were a little caught off guard.
Well, we're
moving along.
Nothing if not efficient over here. It looks like you've got your panel here. I'm gonna have everybody turn their cameras on.
We're not all in yet.
Oh, okay, we can wait a second.
Okay.
Assuming you'll be turning to them for assistance with a question, so I would like to swear them.
Yep, please.
Okay. We can wait a sec. All right, I think we have everyone now. We just need Farouk's camera, I think.
Tasim, yep.
Oh, sorry. There you are. Okay.
And our AFO also is not on yet, but we'll get him to be sworn in before Q&A, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. So have everybody raise your right hand, and I'll also just want to hear you respond when I get to that point. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give to the Committee on Public Works and Operations is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great.
I do. I do.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. And Director, when you're ready, you may begin your testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Councilmember Nadeau, members of the Committee on Public Works and Operations and staff. I'm Lindsay Parker, the Chief Technology Officer for DC Government, testifying today on my 5th budget hearing for OCTO on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser's FY24 Fair Shot budget for the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. I'm joined today by a number of folks on my team, and we'll make sure to introduce them as they speak, but just quickly, our Chief Administrative Officer, Carol Harrison, our Chief Operating Officer, Tasim Farouk, our Deputy CTO, Stephen Miller, another Deputy CTO, Henry Lofton, and our Associate CTO, Michael Rupert. And I want to first take just a minute, because this might be my last time testifying on behalf of OCTO, to say thank you to an incredible team for all they do to keep DC government moving every day. We truly have some of the best professionals who bring their talents and their passion every day to work to serve DC, our residents, our businesses, and our visitors. So I just want to take a second to say thank you. In FY23, Mayor Bowser doubled down on the need for a post-pandemic technology-enabled government to support DC's comeback, and made significant investments in the modernization projects, the technology modernization projects across government. These investments led to the launch of the new DC Business Portal, modernization of our core hardware, network equipment to guard against the growing sophistication of cybersecurity threats. We began the process of redesigning DC.gov and really streamlining how IT is requested and used across DC government, just to name a few investments. For the 4th year in a row, though, I must say, the price of technology continues to increase at a faster clip than we've ever really seen before. In just the past 4 years, costs have increased by nearly 20%. And more of the OCTO budget is taken up by our non-discretionary spending on licensing for major enterprise systems and software. We really worked to determine what services we could do without and which we could consolidate to absorb these growing licensing costs. So in short, what you're seeing in this year's budget chapter is OCTO's proposed budget for FY24 at $78 million in local funds, $11.7 million in special purpose funds, and $18.4 in capital funds. Now, what this also reflects is Mayor Bowser continuing to wholeheartedly support the projects that we've worked on in FY23 to move towards that comeback, the digitalization of DC government, and make sure that we're meeting customers where they're expecting us to meet them. And she's done that with new investments of about $23.5 million in OCTO's budget. This is going to allow for these high impact efforts that we began this year to continue to speed up digital service delivery to more people in more areas, continue to shore up our core infrastructure, and further enhance our cybersecurity risk management approach to protecting our people, our data, and systems. In short, Mayor Bowser's FY24 Fair Shot budget makes government service faster, simpler, fairer. On cybersecurity, one of the most critical components of our budget, bad actors attempt to infiltrate our systems every day. They aim hundreds of thousands of even more sophisticated schemes towards our networks, our systems, our employees. And OCTO has made massive strides over the past few years to better analyze, prevent, and mitigate the likelihood that these bad actors can compromise our people, data, and systems. Mayor Bowser has made cybersecurity a top priority. Since 2018, DC government's cybersecurity budget has increased by 68%, from $7.9 million to $13.2 million. Since 2015, Mayor Bowser has invested a total of $28 million in cybersecurity capital investments. These cyber investments and Mayor Bowser's FY24 Fair Shot budget allow us to continue this work and do more. So $9.2 million in capital investment to continue the modernization of enterprise infrastructure. This updates and secures the infrastructure that connects our buildings, our people throughout DC government. $1.1 million in a one-time enhancement and $5 million in federal grant funds over a 3-year performance period to continue to build out. And that $5 million in federal grant funds is coming from the Department of Homeland Security, CISA, to continue to build out our cyber risk management framework. Another $3 million in capital investment to continue development of our IT service management system to track all technology assets and service needs, to ensure that we really have a clear understanding of our devices and the software that folks are using across the enterprise, to make sure that if we do see a cyber threat, we're able to even more quickly figure out exactly where it's coming from and what other devices and systems on our network are at risk. And as I mentioned briefly in my performance hearing, I'm so proud that our cybersecurity awareness efforts are also making an impact on employee behavior and increased collaboration with agency IT leads. More than 90% of agency CIOs said that OCTO, in quotes, has educated us on the importance of cybersecurity and our role in it. I'm super proud of that. These new investments by Mayor Bowser will allow OCTO to create an even more resilient and efficient IT foundation, ensuring that data is integrated and processed more securely, integrated, processed, and stored more securely across environments. When it comes to digital services, what is much more interesting to everybody, because it truly impacts your customer experience, the mayor's FY23 investment, so this year, in our new digital services team continues to have a major impact on how residents, businesses, visitors, and DC employees interact with DC government. The digital services team works with agencies to co-design solutions with agencies that will really put the user first. Empowers agencies through technology to deliver services equitably and efficiently. In FY23, in February 2023, OCTO and the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, with the support of at least 5 other agencies, publicly launched the new DC business portal. You can check it out at beta.business.dc.gov. Again, that's beta.business.dc.gov, which streamlines the process of starting a business in DC and also eases the administrative burden for existing businesses. In fact, one CBE owner just shared recently that unlike any year before, and this is a longtime CBE, he's been in business for about 20 years, was able to get through the process in under 10 minutes. to renew his business license. So that was pretty neat to see sort of real-time impact on a business owner that needs to be focused on delivering his goods and services and not sort of the administrative burden of getting a new license. The platform, think about TurboTax for business licensing, is meant to make navigating the corporate registration and licensing processes more intuitive while asking applicants proactive questions, setting expectations for how long something might take. Existing businesses will receive friendly automated reminders via email, text message, and/or the portal's message center when a license or registration is approaching the renewal date. And the neat thing about those messages is they're not necessarily, maybe in the past, we would have had engineers coming up with some of that language in those messages. We are actually co-creating those messages with the program teams and running it by actual business owners to make sure that they understand those messages too. So best of all, there's really no need for a new username or password to complicate things. The system is using the same single sign-on platform that's familiar to our business community already. In parallel, the digital services team began the redesign of dc.gov by spending the past 2 months collecting feedback from more than 1,300 businesses and residents, including many ANCs who actively participated through a digital survey embedded on all 90 dc.gov websites, along with 5 live virtual listening sessions. The team is now analyzing the data and beginning our design work, which is super exciting. We're excited to be able to share designs with the public for feedback later this year. By again investing another $4.5 million for these projects, Mayor Bowser is showing that making customer-centric products that are fairer, simpler, and faster remains a top priority. Here are some of Mayor Bowser's investments in the FY24 budget that will help continue that government transformation. $4.5 million to continue expanding features for the DC business licensing portal, beginning development on a resident-focused portal, and think new 311, and a new dc.gov website. We're also working on creating an efficient and easy-to-use experience that provides users the right information at the right time where they expect it to be. Another $1.6 million to complete the work on a cloud data exchange to allow agencies to ingest, share, and analyze government data faster, more easily, and more securely than before. Another $3 million to upgrade Microsoft 365 licenses to really increase our ability to communicate, collaborate, and also increase security as well. We aren't just bringing this human-centered design approach to our public-facing products, but also to those that are most widely used by our government colleagues. And that's that Microsoft 365 that we just talked about. The mayor continued her investment in our tech enablement team this year, which just in its first 8 months of activity helped more than 3,300 DC government employees fully utilize a host of core enterprise tools like Microsoft Teams, Excel, Project, like Box, like QuickBase. QuickBase is a rapid, low-code application platform that folks can kind of test out new digital business processes quickly. In addition to these core enterprise tools, the tech enablement team also drove better utilization of specialized enterprise technologies like Tableau, ArcGIS, and many more. Their efforts are really changing the way that employees work, collaborate, and innovate across DC government. The tech enablement team has also created more than 400 self-help articles on octohelps.dc.gov, which is our employee service portal to empower employees to more easily understand how to help themselves when it comes to things like resetting passwords, inputting their time in PeopleSoft, or requesting new software. Actually, and none of these things that I just listed actually requires OCTO intervention in most cases. The most stunning number is that about 80% of the calls that come into OCTO Helps is to reset your PeopleSoft password. And the truth is, we don't have the ability to actually reset it. We simply walk you through the steps where you do it yourself. And so this is the kind of education that the tech enablement team is really pushing out. And what it does, ultimately, it allows the OCTO Helps team to focus on more complex issues faster so that we're not spending time taking PeopleSoft password reset calls. And so if there's one thing that I could ask of all DC government agents, employees, is to not call us about PeopleSoft password resets, but you can do it yourself. OCTO Helps is the customer-facing portion of our IT service management system, which the mayor initiated in FY23 with a $2.5 million investment. And while the front end has that knowledge base that I talked about and the service desk for ticketing, the back end is tracking all technology assets, costs, and service demands to really better determine the true cost of IT and find efficiencies and really economies of scale across DC government to make sure that when we come back next year, we'll have an even better understanding, and therefore it will be reflected in our budget. And then on to digital equity. We talked at length in our performance hearing about this, but being connected is no longer a luxury, but a necessity. Yet, unfortunately, home broadband remains unaffordable, unattainable for many DC residents. In March 2022, Mayor Bowser launched our Office of State Broadband and Digital Equity. And that team has been working to meet the federal requirements to receive about $100 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law. The team has already secured about $5 million in planning. It's a planning grant under the federal Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, and $460,000 under the State Digital Equity Planning Grant Program to address broadband access and equity, and really not to address, but to plan for addressing broadband access and equity in wards 5, 7, and 8. The team continues to push eligible residents to the federal Affordable Connectivity Program provided by President Biden, which provides up to $30 per month towards your internet bill for low-income households. You can enroll at fcc.gov/ACP, which is pretty difficult to remember, but you can also go to techtogether.dc.gov, or you can call us. This is the OCTO team at 202-CONNECT. That's 202-266-6328, and we'll help you get through a relatively cumbersome process to get that $30 per month towards your internet bill. The Office of the State Broadband and Digital Equity's Community Internet Program, which helps new internet service providers and incumbent internet service providers leverage rooftops of DC government's 680 plus buildings to further expand service to our underserved communities, is continuing to expand. The program's footprint through our partnership with our first ISP to come in, WeLink, has seen our service area throughout Ward 5 just grow. In fact, we've seen it grow about 50% in the last few months, and I'll make sure that we have that exact number in the Q&A for you. But it's pretty remarkable how quickly that program is growing. Now, we're eager to add additional internet service providers to the program, and we're hosting an ISP Summit on May 4th, 2023, to showcase our progress thus far and highlight the unique opportunity this program offers. And so if you're an ISP or you're interested in potentially thinking about the ISP business, please visit s.dc.gov/ISP Summit. Again, that's s.dc.gov/ISP Summit to RSVP. So we really appreciate the opportunity to share Mayor Bowser's FY24 Fair Shot investments in OCTO and plans for continuous improvement. And we're looking forward to working with the committee on making sure that we're achieving a lot of the things that we laid out today. So this concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Let me start off by asking a workflow question. I know that you've recently been promoted to another position within the Bowser administration. Do you expect to continue on also as the Chief Technology Officer?
I believe the mayor addressed this in a question 2 weeks ago, but she is actively looking to name an interim in the next few weeks.
So who is the acting director at this time?
Right now, it's me.
Okay, thank you. This is the third budget cycle where we've gotten to work with the Council Office on Race Equity, but since it's the first year that I've had this committee, I'd like to ask some questions that'll help me better understand any racial disparities that may exist in agency operations. In your proposed FY24 budget, are there specific programs or allocations that are specifically designed to address racial or economic inequities faced by district residents? And if you could just describe those.
Actually, I think that well, a lot of our work helps to make sure that we're bridging the digital divide. So the work that we're currently pursuing to make sure that we get the $100 million worth of federal funding is really to make sure that many of our Black and Brown residents who traditionally haven't been as able to make the decision to have broadband at home are able to. We're gonna work to make sure that we've got more competition in the ISP market so that we bring down prices and we increase quality in our broadband market in the city.
Okay, that's great. And then speaking of technology, my digital memo just jumped on me. Hold on a second. In your proposed FY24 budget, which reductions may burden certain communities more than others? And if applicable, what strategies has your department taken to mitigate any potential adverse effects?
I don't believe that any of our cuts are going to impact any communities specifically.
Okay. And how much of the agency's data is collected or disaggregated by race? Are there performance or operational data points that could be collected by race that aren't currently?
That's a good question. I think that kind of goes back to the digital equity work. Again, we'll look to see ways to measure as we move forward with federal funding from BIL, how many households we're connecting by race.
Great. As part of the next budget season, how could community members, especially communities of color and low-income communities, be engaged or consulted to identify programming or service needs from your department?
It's a really good question. We have done a number of, well, first off, we work with DCPS. They're arguably 60% of our network students at DCPS. And so we're doing more and more work with them to make sure that teachers, students, DCPS Central have the technology that they need to learn. And with that, access opportunities in the future. And so that's a big component. Yeah. Actually, do you want to ask your question one more time? And I'll make sure. I think I had another example and I can't remember.
As part of the next budget season, how can community members, especially communities of color? Okay.
And so to that end, DCPS has put together a strategic plan, a strategic technology plan. We played a part in that, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to play a part in that as that improves, as that kind of grows and continuously improves over the coming years. I think that's a real way that we can make sure that our families, our DC residents in DCPS are able to bridge the digital divide by making sure that we've got the next generation well prepared to help their parents and their grandparents at home. So that's one way. The second way is really rethinking DC.gov. Let's make sure that DC.gov is super straightforward, especially for those that are not digitally native. And we're doing engagement to do just that. But I also think that the digital services work that we're doing to really streamline the customer experience is also going to be helpful for our DC government employees. So whether or not you're able to access DC.gov, you're able to kind of come in and access services online, you should be able to pick up the phone, talk to an employee, and because our streamlined services are so straightforward, that employee is going to be able to walk that resident or that senior through that service process in an even easier way. That to me is sort of where I think this year's budget, FY23, and the mayor's FY24 budget will really impact the ability for a number of our families that are perhaps not digitally native to access services at a better rate, and also do so simply.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mhm.
Also, I would like to note that I have provided some support services to government employees needing to log into PeopleSoft from time to time. So hopefully I'm helping out the team. Not joking. Somebody actually the other day was like, I can't get in. It's been down for a week. And I logged in and I was like, it's not down. So let's see what's wrong with your computer.
We really appreciate it. We'll name you an honorary member of our OCTO Tech Enablement team.
Listen, if I have to report that on my filing, it's not worth it. So, but I'm happy to help wherever I can. Yeah, I explained that sometimes when you're out of office, you have to log in through a different site, and that seemed to solve the problem for him. So, see, it's a team effort around here, folks.
Thank you.
Yeah. During OCTO's performance oversight hearing, we were talking about the fact that big tech is looking for cash and raising their prices right now. Are those rising costs of services adequately reflected in this proposed budget?
In fact, they are. And we can get into that when we talk about vacancies, but we've, you'll see some add-ins and some subtractions from different areas in our budget. And the majority of additions are in our NPS budget to reflect that rising cost of tech.
Great. And you also talked about how the agency sometimes has to get creative as a result of these rising costs. And you touched on this in your testimony now, but how do we see that creativity reflected here in the mayor's budget?
Yeah, in a number of ways. I mean, we really looked at, across our organization, what roles we need on the team. We took a hard look at our vacancies, and that's what we found arguably 16 vacancies that now you'll see show up with some increases in NPS costs.
Mm-hmm. I got it. So, all right. Has OCTO replaced local funds with federal resources in FY23 or does it intend to do so in FY24?
Yeah, we have actually transferred out 5 FTEs so that they'll be paid for utilizing that. That's in our state broadband office.
Mm-hmm.
We'll use those planning dollars to pay for those 5 FTEs.
Okay, and what year does that run out?
I believe it's a 3-year. Well, sorry, it's a 5-year program overall. This planning money is going to help us get through the next year.
Okay. All right, and given those are FTEs, I'm
well,
not looking at it. Yeah, go ahead.
The whole intention of, and actually I should take this moment to ask for your support, the whole expectation of the bipartisan infrastructure law for most of the funds that touch OCTO, they're looking for the local government or the jurisdiction to really kind of phase in to the budget once those federal funds run out, to phase in increases. And so that's what we'll be coming back to you for in the coming years, to make sure that we've got adequate local funds to continue the good work that we're doing with that team. But for the next 5 years, we'll be able to complement the local investment with those federal dollars.
I see. Do you think you'll only be needing that FTE for 1 year though?
No, so we'll be able to have them for 5 years.
Okay. Got it. Okay. I'm going to. I'm trying to decide if I want to jump around a little bit, so bear with me. Hold on.
Problem.
Based on that answer. Yeah, let's talk about FTEs for a minute. I was going to wait to do that until we got through some programs, but let's go ahead. So I noticed there's a proposed reduction of 38 FTEs. Can you confirm that all of the reductions in FTEs aside from the transfers came from vacant positions?
I can. And well, let me just walk through that a little bit. So 17 of those FTEs were transferred out to other agencies. Still those and actually the people in those roles, so it's 17 FTEs, sorry, will be transferred out to other agencies. And that's supporting our mainframe team. We can get into that in a little bit.
Okay.
And then 5 FTEs were transferred out to those federal funds that we just talked about. And then the remaining 16 of those FTEs were actual vacancies. And those vacancies, that's about an 8% cut, those were eliminated. So we'll have 318 positions in FY24.
What percentage of total vacant positions were cut?
The 16 vacancies, that's about 8%.
This is a problem with not having your AFO, then you don't have someone to do fast math on percentages for you.
I have it all right here because I got a great cheat sheet.
So, okay, good. So how many vacant positions do you have left?
We have 4 vacant positions remaining this year in FY23. We talked in the performance hearing about 14 vacancies, 10 of which we were actively backfilling. We've hired for 6 of them since we last talked, and we've got 4 that are still in process. 2 that are currently posted on our website, 1 that's about to be posted, and then 1 that's about to be closed out.
So those 10 we did talk about, I recall. What about the 16 you cut? Why were those vacant?
Those were vacant when we talked already and frozen, so that because we knew that we were going to have to take cuts.
Do you anticipate these reductions will have operational impacts on the agency?
I do not.
Are there any part-time, contingent, or term employees that are going to be out of job next year as a result of staffing cuts to the agency?
No one is going to be out of a job next year.
Okay.
Due to the budget.
All right. And we talked about the transfer of the mainframe. That's 17. Okay. And those folks are transferred to the agencies where they are doing the work?
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, the agencies, there's 6 agencies that rely on mainframe to do their work, and those agencies will be paying for those FTEs. So they'll still be here, they'll still be working on mainframe.
Got it.
Yep.
What were your vacancy savings in FY23 and what will they be in FY24?
Just about 2%. And that's what we try to kind of shoot for each year.
That's a little lower than industry standard, right?
It is. It's really exciting. We have lots of people applying for our jobs.
That's good. Interesting. So we're not necessarily, there's going to be, the plan is for there not to be a vacancy in your position, that there would be a handoff. Okay. Okay.
Very soon.
Okay. And do you, we can talk to your AFO about this, I guess, at the staff level after this too, but I'm curious whether or not you are currently being paid out of EOM or the OCTO budget.
I'm currently paid out of the OCTO budget.
Okay. Well, thanks for nothing. Gotta really use that vacancy savings. All right. So OCTO's FY23 to 24 performance oversight responses indicated that the agency had 14 vacant positions, 10 of which were under active recruitment. We just talked about that. And the agency intended to have backfilled by the end of the second quarter. All right, you just gave me an update on that. In light of cuts to personnel in the mayor's proposed budget, what important vacant positions are you prioritizing hiring for?
Well, I could talk right now. I mean, just in general, I would argue that any time that somebody leaves, and most times they're leaving to go to another DC government agency, and we're going to celebrate that, any vacant position right now is critical. And so we really take them all very seriously. Right now, you'll see on our website and actually more easily on OCTO's Twitter account. We routinely post all the different IT jobs throughout the city there, but the two ones that are posted right now are a deputy CISO and are an attorney advisor position. So both are really cool jobs where I would argue that you're never going to get more hands-on experience more quickly than working for a jurisdiction like ours in our cybersecurity team. And so if you're interested in a career in cybersecurity, this is really the place to learn and grow. And the same thing goes for our attorneys. We've got just a stellar group of attorneys on our general counsel's team right now, really looking at the future, thinking about sort of data sharing agreements, thinking about AI, machine learning, and making sure that we're really leaning forward into what we need to think about to protect resident data, but also make sure that we're taking advantage of neat technologies that are coming online quicker than ever before. So both jobs are just tremendously important that we find the right person, but both are really exciting career paths for anybody interested.
Thank you for that. So there is a 53% change in personnel under agency management. It looks like it's for an FTE coming in at 195K. What's that position?
Simply a COLA adjustment. That's not an actual FTE number change.
Got it. Is that a COLA for multiple positions?
Five.
Okay. There are two new FTEs under communications, activity 1080, despite a decrease in both contractual and other services. What's going on with that one?
Yep, those are just realigned from the web team as we think about dc.gov going forward. We want to make sure that we also have a stronger communications team to help make sure we've got great content.
Okay. I believe Fritz Mulhauser mentioned there's a chief data officer position that's been vacant for some time. Is that accurate? Can you explain what that position is and why it's still vacant?
The selection is made and we haven't publicly announced it yet, but we're really excited to in the coming days.
Fantastic. Please keep us posted.
We will.
All right. I'm gonna back to my originally scheduled memo here. So that's all I had on FTEs for now. So we're going to go to projects and initiatives. You talked a bit about cybersecurity in your testimony. I want to make sure to dig into it a little more. So the agency's budget chapter says the mayor's proposed budget includes $2.3 million to restore one-time funding in the security operations division to support ongoing cybersecurity initiatives. Is this one-time or recurring funding?
Cassie's going to take this answer.
You guys hear me? Councilmember, that actually includes two enhancements, the 1.1 for our cybersecurity, and then also the 1 million for our business portal expansion.
I see. Thank you. So will there be recurring costs for this, or are these one-time costs?
These are one-time in the current budget. And then we also, our director mentioned earlier in her testimony, we are also receiving $5 million CISA federal grants, which will be augmenting these funds for the next 5 years.
Okay, so the funds are recurring, the funds are one time, the recurring need is recurring, but that recurring need will be met by the federal allocation?
Correct.
Okay. The budget chapter also says the agency proposal includes $2.15 million in one-time funds to support two projects, including $1.15 million for vulnerability and risk management implementation projects. Is this different than the $2.3 million we just discussed that's going to supporting ongoing cybersecurity initiatives?
So it's the same. Just turn your volume down. It's the same thing that you just asked about. 2.1 million. 2.1 million. 1 million of that is for the business portal And then 1.1 is for two different enhancements. Vulnerability remediation and cybersecurity, and the second one is risk management. Vulnerability remediation means that we'll have $500,000 to help agencies that have some of the biggest vulnerabilities on our network to close them. And then the second one, the risk management framework, is to really build out our going into the second year of our risk management framework work, allows us to better understand where our greatest risks are across our network by collating and collecting information about all the applications that exist on our enterprise, and making sure, and the IG is doing a kind of an audit. It's not called an audit, it's called something else, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's a little bit less than an audit, on making sure that they understand sort of the security waiver process. This risk management framework will allow us to capture all those security waivers that we ask agencies to fill out when they have a scanned application that's about to go live, where there's a vulnerability that we know exists, but we have to go forward because the business operations side of the house requires it. We'll now have a way to capture those security waivers and come back in 60, 90, 120 days to make sure that we're really closing some of those vulnerabilities that we allow because we have to for operational reasons, but really want to make sure are closed ultimately.
So lots of investments in cybersecurity. This is something that you've prioritized since you first became CTO. We had a very serious breach in an independent agency a few weeks ago. How does something like that still happen, and how do we prevent it from happening again? What role does OCTO play here?
Yeah, this is a good question. A little bit of a tricky issue. You know, at OCTO, we have 22 people on our cybersecurity team. And that's 22 eyes across our network every day thinking about what we need to do to prevent what we see are more and more sophisticated attacks. But we're not alone. We work with federal agencies, we work with state partners to really make sure that we've got a really thoughtful view of what we need to watch out for. If you're an independent agency, you know, historically in DC government, those independent agencies like to operate by themselves. They don't want to necessarily use or in the past, I would say, they might not have called on OCTO for advice or counsel. They might have thought it would be appropriate to build their own security team. If you're an independent agency, you're not going to have a very big security team. You might have 1 or 2 people that are focused on security. And you might also have decided that you're not even going to use our firewalls. So you're going to have your own firewall set up. And what I can tell you is that 2 people trying to set up a firewall and maintain it and make sure that they have thorough visibility into all the things that are coming at anything that has anything that has .gov in it these days is arguably maybe an approach that was okay 20 years ago. But going forward, the more eyes, the better. And so the mayor's also included a BSA subtitle in her Budget Support Act to ask these independent agencies to come into compliance with the security policies that OCTO has socialized, communicated, and worked with all agencies, independent or not, for the last 3 years. And so it should come as no surprise to these independent agencies that this is the right thing to do, and will help us prevent and at least remediate quickly if we do see other attacks in the future. Remediate more quickly if we see attacks in the future.
Yeah, there was some quick remediation this time.
Well, and perhaps like lessen the extent of the damage, right? That's the whole idea about thinking about cybersecurity as a risk management strategy. It's kind of like protecting your house. There's nothing that we can do that's like 100% foolproof, right? Because there's always going to be something new coming up with, you know, somebody might be able to get down a chimney, who knows, right? But the truth is we got to look at what's the biggest risk. We've got to make sure that we're locking that down to the biggest extent possible that still allows us to engage with the public, which presents a risk. but making sure that we're going into that eyes wide open and with more eyes thinking about what's coming in is the only way that we're going to get to a point where I'm not as worried about some of those independents.
Okay. And we're going to talk about some stuff in the BSA later too. So we may get to some more of that. So you gave us an update on the dc.gov website redesign during your testimony. I've seen the survey. What else should we be seeing right now to show us that that's progressing?
So as I mentioned, we heard from, and actually, Mike Rupert, do you want to give us an update?
Sure. Councilmember, we had a survey out for, I think, a little over 45 days. It wasn't a short survey, but we had over 1,300 people finish it, which is great. We've had ANC members, businesses, lots of residents. And then that was great to collect that data. And from that survey, we then held 5 live listening sessions where people came on. We had them on evenings, days. We had one Saturday event. And those were great to actually people to point out actual examples. We're taking that data now and analyzing it, but we're also have an RFP going out any day to have someone start on the architecture work, start on the design. So one of the things I know, the design is one thing, but it's not the most important, but people want to have that first. So we're excited to get some of those sample designs and get those out to the public later this year, hopefully in the early fall. And then actually start building out the websites and starting thinking about the integration with the portals that we're also building, because those are in parallel.
So you said building out in the fall? The back end work? Yeah. Well, okay, so let's say, is there adequate funding for this redesign in the
No, I didn't turn
budget?
it on.
Oh, sorry. It's okay. Is there adequate funding for this redesign in the proposed budget?
There is adequate funding.
And how much funding in the budget is allocated for this specifically?
There's $1 million this year and $1 million next year. Okay. And then there's also $4.5 million in capital for digital services in general. And that really touches on kind of all of that, right? So we're going to think about the truth, like it's the skin and the organization of our website. But the portals is the actual kind of nuts and bolts that get folks to a service, right? Through a process so that they can actually get a service. And so that's why all of that together is really going to make sure that we're kind of redesigning the website, right? And I just misspoke. There's $1 million this year. There's $4.5 million in a capital investment next year that is included with the business portal work and dc.gov redesign.
So it's all in one line item.
That's right.
You can't break out like business portal versus cut.
That's right. And we want to keep it together because it's going to be so, you wouldn't want to have us design a business portal that doesn't fit the look and feel of dc.gov redesign.
Right.
So it really kind of needs to be thought through together.
I got you. Now, do you have a role in the DC Smart Street Lighting project that DDOT is rolling out right now?
So we have been consulted and look forward to an even greater collaborative exchange with DDOT going forward.
Mm-hmm. And any collaboration you're doing on that is adequately budgeted for?
Which is one of those things that we'll be coordinating with them on to make sure that we understand fully.
But is it correct to say that you don't currently have any funding set aside for that particular project or anything in an MOU with DDOT on that?
There's no dedicated funding currently in the FY24 budget that you see.
Okay.
In the OCTO FY24 budget that you see.
Right. So we had a lot of discussion in our hearing with the Office of Contract and Procurement about the PASS system. That's redundant, sorry. The Procurement Automated Support System, AKA PASS, with the new cloud system put on hold in 2020 due to the elimination of funding. And then in August 2022, the Office of the Inspector General released a procurement risk assessment report, which observed that the PASS is so outdated, the agency's continued use of it puts the district at huge risk for fraud, waste, and abuse. In FY24, there's an additional 4.2 million allocated to this project in OCP's budget. They said they'd be using it to work with OCTO, OCFO, and the city administrator to stabilize diffs and maintain PASS. Can you explain what OCTO's role is in this process?
Sure. So we at OCTO, we've got an enterprise applications team that handles PASS and PeopleSoft, actually. And so while OCP is sort of one of the biggest power users, right, of PASS, there are also some independent agencies that utilize PASS for their procurement. Same kind of thing with PeopleSoft. DCHR is really kind of the super user, but UDC, MPD, folks that have independent HR authority also use these enterprise systems. And so when it comes to PASS, one thing I would say, and I probably haven't talked to the IG about this yet, but the SOAR system that was the old OCFO financial system, that system was like 30 years out of compliance. So if we're talking about major risks on our network, SOAR was the biggest. Now, PASS is getting towards end of life, not there completely yet. In fact, the entity that stands up PASS has indicated that they might be allowing for support for another year or so. I take what the IG suggests, but I would posit that there are systems that are older, more out of date, more out of service than PASS. And so we've got to prioritize those. And so we did with the financial system. What I will say is that anytime you bring on a major enterprise system, a new one, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. It turns out the system called diffs, there's a steeper learning curve than we would have ever imagined, and we've got to make sure that that is our focus, and that's to George Shutter's point. We're gonna focus on that and make sure that we are able to pay our vendors, our residents, and our employees as quickly as they deserve.
Thank you for that. So you said that the team that supports PASS, independent of DC government, I assume, says they may be offering support for another year?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it might be 2 years.
And when do we find out?
We are their only customer. Or not their only customer. We're not their only customer. Sorry, we're not their only customer. And so therefore, they're not going to just pull the rug out from customers that haven't modernized yet. And so this is sort of the game that gets played with major tech companies and these sort of major enterprise applications is they try to rush you to get off so that they can kind of close down their operation, right? And this is kind of we can talk about this in another aspect of ours as well, right? They're spending a lot of money on an older system, maybe more money than they are on some of their newer, flashier products. And so they're going to try to do everything that they can to encourage you to get off of that platform. That's what they're doing here as well. That being said, we're not interested in adding risk to our business process. We would add risk if we went if we jumped fully into modernizing our procurement system while we're working to make sure that we're all up and ready on our financial system.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there any legal obligation for the provider of PASS to continue supporting us?
That's an interesting question. I'll look into it, but no, I think is the answer that, we've seen other large tech companies just stop providing a service or stop providing a product. And if they're good, and usually we have good relationships with these bigger vendors, they're going to give us a good heads up and they'll work with us before they just turn off. But I'll look into the legal obligation part.
Just curious. What is OCTO's approach to monitoring and evaluating the effectiveness of its programs and initiatives, and what measures have been taken to address any identified areas for improvement?
It's a really good question. We continue to survey our teams, our managers, and our CIOs, our agency CIOs that we work with weekly. But we are really focused on making sure that we have even better measures that we'll be able to publicly show in the coming, my hope is in the next 2 quarters, we'll have a better way to do that. That is due to the mayor's investment in the IT service management system. We're now going to have all of our tools, all of our products, all of our services in one system, so that we have a better sense of how they're performing, who's using them, and the value that we're getting from them. That's how we're hoping to. And I think, as with all new things, we thought that would be faster than it's taken, but we're pushing to make sure that we've got something to show by the end of the year, no question.
Great. Now, you've talked about a bit on how you're focused on prioritizing core enterprise services. And we've talked about a lot today. So if we've already covered this and there's nothing more to add, that's fine. But can you please share what the plans are for modernization of legacy IT systems and infrastructure?
I think there's sort of 2 things there, maybe. So I think you are probably interested in understanding what the $9.2 million increase in capital is for hardware replacement. Essentially. Okay, so that is for our networking devices. So we talked about this, I think, in the performance hearing, where we've come up with a plan to refresh our core devices. Henry, do you actually want to weigh in? You want to talk about this? Henry Laughlin?
Okay. Yes, council member. I think we spread it across 6 or 7 years, where we're proposing, we're asking for federal capital funds, to refresh. And the approach is that we would focus on kind of the smaller, more service impacting devices. So kind of the core, the nucleus of the network. And then we would expand out to address some of the agency building needs as well. So it's a rolling process that also includes, it may have included some professional services as well.
What kind of devices are these? Could you tell me, just because I don't know what the whole range of options are here?
Sure. So it's all network infrastructure. Kind of trying to think of simple terms. So routers and switches that provide access to every building by which you can communicate out for internet access, for wireless, even your phone calls. So a phone call is processed on our network. That processing unit is kind of considered core infrastructure, whereas the phone itself is not, right? It's an end user device. So we're working from the inside of the network, expanding out. Is kind of the approach.
Got it. So the small devices you mentioned are like the routers and things like that.
Sorry, say that one more time.
The small devices that Mr. Lofton just mentioned, those would be like the routers and things.
Yep, okay. Routers and switches.
Yeah, and we're not talking about any end user devices here. Just
not at all. Yes, okay. Not at all. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you asked another question about legacy systems.
Yeah.
Systems, when you think about systems, typically we're thinking about sort of like an application, for instance. And so some of our vulnerability remediation funds will be able to help with sort of older legacy systems that we find major risks in. We can use some of that $500,000 to complement agencies' budgets to get to a good plan to modernize. But the digital services modernization investment, $4.5 million, will really help us with the modernizing of applications that touch customers.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on how language models and artificial intelligence services such as ChatGPT can positively impact the public sector workforce?
Sure. Our Deputy CTO, Stephen Miller, will take that.
Good morning, council member. So, OCTO's waiting. Those platforms sit at like different areas of maturity. It depends on like any given day. You're going to hear a different way about the pros and cons of different language models and different AIs. At this stage, these models are pretty good at coming in and reading and understanding documentation that we have on how our services work. So if we have documentation that's clear and concise and complete on a given service, these language models can act, very clearly as like a tier 1 help desk. They can act as a call taker. They can help direct people to right services. They can be like a modern kind of search engine that's going to get someone to the type of service that they're looking for. There's definitely longer term conversations that we need to have though with these models so that we can learn how they can help us with kickstarting ideation, kickstarting the documentation of services. Like I said, we want to make sure they're operating off of clear and concise documentation today. So if we have them write that documentation, we can't guarantee it's going to be clear and concise. We can't guarantee it's going to be accurate. So they can help us start to strategize around that documentation. They can help us start to strategize about how we want to formulate our budget in future years if we wanted to, but they are very basic and very like draft level services today. So that's how we should look at them. And that's how we should look at adoption of them. We should learn and minimize what we're doing with them, but then, plan for a future where they're going to be doing more and more for us. It's a good question. It's a great question.
Oh, and a very helpful answer. Thank you. We heard from several public witnesses about the importance of OCTO's role in the development of the new DC archives. How is OCTO working with relevant stakeholders to ensure the success of the archives?
Good question. We'll continue to work with the Secretary's office as they pull us into that conversation. Actually, to tell you the truth, the Microsoft 365 investment in the mayor's budget will allow us to do kind of e-discovery, will allow us to sort of do even better searches on our digital records that exist on the Microsoft platform going forward, so as to more easily push them to the archives as appropriate. So I think the mayor's investment in the archives, as well as in OCTO's budget, will help make sure that we've got a really, I'm really excited about the digitally enabled archives that we'll have in the future. It'll be really cool.
And can you provide an update on the procurement of a software system for the preservation of electronic records?
I cannot.
Okay. In general, not just for the archives?
We preserve
for our FOIA responses, et cetera.
That's what the Office 365 investment is going to do.
Okay. And is that for like?
It's for emails and anything that's on the Microsoft platform. So Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, project plans, et cetera. Now, this is where the centralization versus decentralized OCTO gets a little muddy, right? Because what we don't have is we don't have full visibility into electronic records that are created by applications that we don't have anything to do with. So those are the kind of conversations that actually the cloud data exchange investment that the mayor put in the budget for $1.6 million will allow us to have better visibility into. So that's that's definitely part of, there's steps that we've got to take in order to get to a point where we're able to have a clear understanding of all data, all records across our system, and make sure that we're archiving them accordingly.
And for Office 365, how far back in time does that take us, or is that more sort of like the modern era?
The beginning.
Okay, so everything's going to end up in there.
Everything is already, already in there today.
Okay.
Since the beginning of DC.gov emails, which is a little wild. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, that's a big cloud. Or multiple clouds. It's like a cloud forest. Okay, so where do your special purpose revenue funds come from?
So those come from DCNet's work. So I've talked to you a little bit about the fact that we have DCNet, which stands up, and you just heard from Deputy CTO Henry Lofton, stands up the networking that allows for DC government to be connected. But DCNet was also such a sort of stellar investment over time that our federal partners also use DCNet. So we've got about 25 federal customers and about 100 nonprofit customers. And so that is where our special purpose funds are generated from, those customers paying DCNet for service. And that service comes in a number of different forms, whether it's primary, providing primary internet and network connectivity, secondary, like a backup, and or just telephone connectivity.
That's great. And was there a reduction in revenue from DCNet?
There is, and that is because we've seen federal customers and federal contracts changing over time. They're making, they're being forced to do more with less as well at the federal level, and so that's a sort of a true up of what we actually expect to receive from the federal government going forward. Now, what I will say is the $100 million that we're going after in the bipartisan infrastructure law ultimately helps DCNet grow and expand our network and our fiber plant so that we become a middle mile provider. And so there are some expected revenues there as well that hopefully will, turn the tide on that account going forward.
But nothing you can certify yet.
That's right.
Too soon.
That's right.
Yeah, that's always a bummer.
That's okay. That's okay.
It'd be nice to be able to spend it in your head already.
That's fair.
Future revenue. Okay. Just one contract question for you. CSG 41 contracts is seeing big changes in discrete places in this budget. Under some activities, we see funding for contractual services go way up, while others it's getting zeroed out or significantly decreased. Can you explain what's going on here? Are you foregoing certain services?
No, this is sort of just like a scrub, making sure that we are some of the one-time investments that we've seen in the past, they go away, and we just make sure that the contractors that were affiliated with those investments also. So it's a true up of that budget line. And what happens is we see these enhancements in our capital budget. We'll be able to utilize some of those enhancements to then make sure that we've got the contractors that we need online to provide the services that everyone is used to.
Okay. All right. So looking at your capital budget, and I do consider myself a wonk, but this was jargony and technical even for me. So you've already talked about the tech refresh project, but for the sake of clarity, can you walk me through the rest of your capital improvements plan? And the highlights?
Is she? Just this? Are you looking at just new capital investments?
Let's start there.
Okay. Actually, since I'm probably not looking at the same thing that you are, what line would you like to start with?
Hang on one second. Okay. How about we start at project DSM 22? Would that be okay? So what are you hoping to achieve with that project? How's it coming along, and why do you need the additional year?
This is the digital services modernization. This is that 4.5 million that I've talked about for the portal, for continuing work on the business portal, adding the resident portal work in the coming year, and then also for the dc.gov modernization.
Okay, got it. What about SDD 21?
This is the 3.5 million for the ITSM or IT service management platform that I just talked to you about. This is the help desk plus the service desk that allows us to actually then see on the back end all of our devices, applications, and products across across our network. So that we can more easily understand the value of IT, sort of the cost of doing business, who's using what products and services that we could potentially spin down, and ultimately have a true cost of, true value of technology to our government going forward.
Great, that's what I needed. Thank you. Do you want to add anything else?
I said 3.5 million and I meant 3 million. My team's just correcting me for the record.
Yeah, we would have been on the hunt for that 0.5. So thank you. Okay. You know how it is.
Yeah, I'm very well aware.
Okay. I want to talk about the BSA and then that'll wind us down. So the Office of the Chief Technology Officer Amendment Act of 2023 expands OCTO's statutory functions as well as provides new and clarifies certain existing authorities. Okay. First of all, your first hurdle is whether or not this is germane to the budget. It seems to have no impact on the financial plan. So why should it be in the BSA?
Well, interestingly enough, the ACFR every single year, so our auditors ask about our cybersecurity resiliency. And in fact, so do our the rating agencies on Wall Street. And the reason is because if there is a cyber attack, there is a cost associated with it. And we've got, we just need to make sure that we're doing as much as we can. And again, I talked about this before, this is a risk management component, is we need to make sure that people are following the protocols, are following the best practices so as to not come up with a major unexpected hit, and also the resulting financial implications that we're gonna have to take on. We kind of talked about that with one of the independent agencies that was recently impacted.
Given that this is likely to be stricken by Chairman Mendelson, is this something you expect the mayor to send down as permanent legislation?
That's sad to understand, or sad to hear. I would strongly recommend that we all think about why it shouldn't be, and that it should be included in the BSA. And we've met with, I think, the majority, or at least the biggest independent agencies to explain just that. And so I'm happy to talk further about it, but I do believe that this is something that is very germane to the budget and should not, and we would be remiss not to have this in here.
Understood. And I would suggest that the team start working with the committee of the whole now on that, because it's already something that's been mentioned to me. So that is probably worth your time.
Thank you.
The legislation would require OCTO to appoint a chief information security officer, but if OCTO already has the funding for this position, why does the agency need to be required to hire them?
We've never put it in the law before. And so this would be sort of formalizing that position, and then also making sure that everybody understands that, the security protocols that we're asking folks to adhere to is set by that entity, that person.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We've already talked about, so there's the provision authorizing OCTO to charge fees to providers in support of the high-speed internet access. Don't you already have that authority with DCNet?
So we have that authority for us to charge customers, those federal agencies and those nonprofits that I talked about in sort of the DC CAN establishment of DCNet, but we don't have the ability to charge internet service providers or smaller ISPs that would be utilizing us as a middle mile provider. So that's what this is going for, which would allow us again to hopefully find some ways to increase that SPR going forward.
Got it. Okay, it's for the middle mile provision. Yep. Okay. I think some of the other concerns being raised about this are from entities like UDC, for example. And so I just think if it's going to move forward, that's something you're going to have to be able to speak to. But if you would like to speak to all of the entities included in the BSA that one might not have expected to be in there, or where there might be resistance, feel free to use this time now if you'd like to do so.
And maybe what we'll do is we'll make sure that we send a formal letter of all the different entities that we've spoke with. There was some confusion, I think, at UDC about what this meant, but we've been in touch and we're working through that.
Okay, that would be very helpful. And I think that is all that I have on that. If it does get stricken from the BSA, we certainly can work with you on moving it as standalone legislation, but it doesn't seem to have a FIS. Is that correct? Or a fiscal impact?
This is where I would argue that it doesn't have a FIS. That's right.
Yeah. Well, I'm only saying that because if we pass it a week after the budget passes, then you're no worse off.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Except if something happens in that week, but that's okay.
Well, even so, it wouldn't be going to effect until October 1st. So right. You would have that issue. But point being, the reason one passes something in the budget is generally because you need it to be accounted for. And if there is no accounting for it, then you're not, you may lose time, but you're not going to lose functionality. So we will work with you and your team if that ends up being the case.
Thank you.
No problem. That is all I have for you all today. Thank you. I appreciate your responsiveness and would like to thank the whole team for all that you are doing. And I'm going to do a little closing statement. You should not feel obligated to stick around for.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you. This concludes today's budget oversight hearing. If you've not yet submitted written testimony, please do so by emailing it to publicworks@dccouncil.gov. The record for this hearing will close at 5:30 p.m. on April 10th, 2023. I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone the Committee on Public Works and Operations will be holding 2 more budget oversight hearings on the following dates. April 11th, Office of Risk Management and the Office of Administrative Hearings. April 12th, the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs, the Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs, the Mayor's Office of Religious Affairs, and the Mayor's Office of LGBTQ Affairs. If you'd like to testify at any of these upcoming Public Works and Operation hearings, you can sign up on my website at brianneknadeau.com/testify. The time is now 12:17 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.